Thank you. I'd like to call to order the Milan Area Schools Board of Education meeting, workshop meeting for Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching online. All board members are present except for Ms. Carrie Macchio. She's excused, as well as our student board member reps. At this time, I would like to take a moment of silence for the events that transpired in Texas this afternoon. So many lives lost. We'll take a moment of silence for that elementary school. Thank you. At this time, we do have a few board recognitions. If I could have the 21-22 Milan High School boys tennis team come on up to the stage to be recognized, I'd appreciate it.
Great job, gentlemen. Excellent job. Excellent job, gentlemen. Great job, gentlemen. Great job, guys. Hey, good job, Mr. Holt.
Excellent. I got a few things to read here, and then we'll have Mr. Hull introduce you guys. I need a motion to commend the 21-22 Milan High School's boys tennis team and their coaches for all of their accomplishments this season.
So moved by Freight.
Support by Heike.
It's been moved by Freight and supported by Heike. Here's the resolution. Whereas the 2021-2022 Milan High School boys tennis team completed its regular season with a 13-6-2 overall record, and whereas the team finished undefeated for the first time in the Huron League, and whereas at the Huron League tournament, flight runner-up finishes were earned by Matthew Bowman at 1 singles, Nathan Bowman at 3 singles, and Ethan Budd and Gunnar Cruz at 4 doubles. And whereas at the Huron League tournament, flight championships or first place finishes were earned by Marco Kilgus at 2 singles, Ryder Knox and Zach Spradlin at 1 doubles, Gavin Cruz and Zach Fink at 2 doubles, and Adam DuBois and Trent Spradlin at 3 doubles. And whereas the team won the Huron League tournament and won its first ever Huron League title, and whereas at the regional tournament, flight runner-up finishes were earned by Zach Fink and Gavin Cruz at 2 doubles, and whereas at the regional tournament, flight championships or first place finishes were earned by Marco Kilgus at 2 singles, Ryder Knox and Zach Spradlin at 1 doubles, Adam DuBois and Trent Spradlin at 3 doubles, and Ethan Budd and Gunnar Cruz at 4 doubles. And whereas the team earned 16 points at the MHSAA regional tournament, which led to its first regional championship and led to the team qualifying for its first state tournament and a top 10 ranking, and whereas the one doubles team of Ryder Knox and Zach Spradlin received first team all-state honors, and whereas the Milan boys tennis team finished at the state tournament with 7 points and an 11th place finish, and whereas the entire boys tennis team maintained an average GPA of 3.68 and 8 were selected as all-state all-academic, and the team was top 10 amongst Division IV tennis teams in the state, and whereas Nathan Rodriguez was named Coach of the Year by the Monroe News, and where coaches Bob Denham, Robert Hall, Victor Michaels, Maya Pamanen, and Nathan Rodriguez, and all members of the 2021-2022 boys tennis team have exhibited great sacrifice and dedication to make these accomplishments possible. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Milan Area School Board of Education commends coaches Bob Denham, Robert Hall, Victor Michaels, Maya Pamanen, and Nathan Rodriguez, and the 2021-2022 boys tennis team for their accomplishments, and we sincerely thank them for the honor and pride they have brought to themselves, their school, and the community. So we'll have Coach Rodriguez introduce the team.
And I just wrote everyone's name down here, so yeah. One second here.
You want us to hold your glasses? Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Sorry to be taking your time here for.
It's yours to take.
I got it right here somewhere in my notes. All right. I think you can hear me. I'm going to start with the freshmen here. Our freshmen were Sawyer Johnson, Grant Segrist, Nathan Bowman, and Gunnar Cruz. Our sophomores, Elias Hobbs and Marco Kilgus. Our juniors, Zach Fink, Tyler Denham, Matt Bowman, Peter Penna, and Gavin Cruz. And our seniors, who did an excellent job, of course, as seniors, all being leaders on this team. Adam Dubois, Trent Spradlin, Zach Spradlin, Ethan Budd, and Ryder Knox.
Woo!
All right, and I wrote a few things I just wanted to say really quick. I know I won't take too much of your time. I just want to say thanks to the school board for having us come up here and for honoring us tonight. It was a really special season. It really was a group effort that I was happy to be a part of. And I think I told the coaches that and the kids that multiple times throughout the season, that I was just happy to be a part of this, and I knew it was going to be special. I want to thank the other coaches here for their time and effort. Bob Denham for bringing his tennis knowledge and expertise to the team. Victor Michaels and Maya Pamanen for being committed to the program, year after year and putting their time and effort in. And Robert Hall for bringing a passion to the sport of tennis. And it was really Mr. Hall here who was the one with the vision, that knew, he saw this team and he said this could be a state qualifier, this could be a regional title team, and he was the one guiding the ship here and to the goals that we were able to accomplish. I also, if you can give them a round of applause to the coaches there. I also want to thank the parents for supporting the boys, every season, no matter what. They're always there and they're doing a great job. And finally, I want to thank the players for putting the team first, buying into what we were trying to accomplish, and believing that this could be special, right? I think you guys knew that. And they were the ones out there swinging the rackets, like I told them, that made this happen. So a big round of applause for them making this season so successful. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Stuff for you.
So just stand up here just for a second, gentlemen. It's been moved and seconded to commend the 2021-2022 Milan High School boys tennis team and their coaches for all their accomplishments this season. Ms. Heika.
Heika, yes. Kiger,
Yes.
Landingham,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight.
Most definitely, yes.
I'm sorry? I didn't hear you, Kirsten.
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries 6-0. Sorry, I got distracted.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for representing Milan. We appreciate it.
Congratulations. Well done.
Congrats.
Well done, Coach.
Congrats.
Next up, if we could have the 21-22 Milan High School equestrian team come to the stage. Good job, Lisa. Get them pepped. Tidy but mighty. I like it. At least you didn't bring a horse.
That'd have been really cool. I would love to see that.
All right, I need a motion to commend the 2021-2022 Milan High School equestrian team and their coach for all their accomplishments this season.
So moved by Freight?
Support by Farrow.
It's been moved and supported to commend the 2021-2022 Milan High School equestrian team and their coach for all their accomplishments this season. Whereas the 2021-2022 Milan High School equestrian team completed its regular season with a second place finish, and whereas the team qualified for regionals and states for the second year in a row, and whereas the team further distinguished itself by placing second in regionals with McKenna Noon placing high point for the entire region, and whereas the team placed 8th in the MIHA Division 10 state championships, and whereas Sydney Bain was second place in hunter over fences, second place in hunt seat equitation, and 10th place in western riding, and whereas Peyton Siag, is that right? Siag? Oh, was 7th place in flags and 9th place in western bareback, and whereas Maddie Souls was 8th place in hunt seat fitting and showing and 10th place in hunt seat equitation, and whereas Julia Lorch was 6th place in hunter over fences, 7th place in saddle seat pattern, and 8th place in saddle seat equitation. Now therefore it be resolved that the Milan Area School Board of Education commends Coach Lisa Bain and the 21-22 equestrian team for their accomplishments, and that we sincerely thank them for the honor and pride they have brought to themselves, their school, and the community. We have Coach Lisa here to introduce her team, part of her team.
Hi, thank you. So we do have a larger team, but a lot of people were unable to make it. Some students had to work, and some students are racing right now, I hear, and was kind of upset that Julia couldn't make it because she was just running the 200 like 2 minutes ago. So first of all, I just wanted to thank all the parents and everybody who had to haul their horses to every single practice. This isn't a team where grandparents can just drop off their kids and leave and then go pick up. We have to haul horses, we have to take care of everything in order for these girls to compete, and the parents made it every single week. And it was really, really awesome. We had a ton of great sponsors that were able to allow us to make it not as expensive for the kids to go to this regionals, and they did a can drive and did a ton of stuff, and it was really, really great. I really wanted to talk about McKenna. McKenna rocked every single class. She was not able to go to states, but every single class you rocked. It didn't matter. Even saddle seat, which she absolutely hated, but she did it because I asked her to. But you always had a smile on your face, and you were always there to help any other teammate and take care of them. And I really appreciate it. And with Peyton, you were a great leader. For your senior year, you took in all of the freshmen. You always had a smile on your face. Even when you were frustrated with a new pony, you took care of everybody and you rocked it as well. Miss Izzy she's a brand new rider with a brand new young horse and has never done this before. And at the end, you placed third, right? Third out of 9 people in trail. That's huge. And I'm so proud of you. And you really showed us how much you can do with hard work and dedication. So thank you guys so much for the girls that could come, and thank you guys. Okay, awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much. So it's been moved and supported to commend the 2021-2022 Milan High School equestrian team and their coach for all their accomplishments this season. Ms. Heika.
Kiger,
Yes.
Landingham,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight,
Most definitely, yes.
Heika, yes. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you so much, ladies. We appreciate it. Yep. All right, next on the agenda is communications. This is time for public comments, and just a reminder, this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you will be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. I will give you a 30-second warning, and I ask you to finish your thought when the beeper goes off. Board members may question speakers, but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Is there anyone that would like to address the board?
Hello, my name is Rachel Hobbs. I'm going to request that you record my comments for the minutes. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I got to make this a quick meeting tonight. I am curious, and I'm not able to stick around, so I would appreciate if people would get back to me by email in response to my questions and issues. I am curious to know what the proposed budget for the 22-23 school year entails, what the head count is based, or what the basis of the head count is, and the dollars per student. Next issue or matter is there was a resolution that was passed on March 9th of 2022, where the Board of Education engaged through a law firm to investigate a complaint alleging violation of Board Policy 3362, and that was approved on March 9th, 2022. In the resolution, it provided a timeline for completing the investigation to 60 days from the date of the resolution. I believe that 60 days has expired, and I'm just curious to know what the status of the investigation is, if it's still going on, and if further information will be provided to the community. I would also like to see the scorecard be brought to the board's table and have that updated. There's been some communication issues, so I would like to know what the progress is being made on those communication issues. I'd also like to see where we are with our strategic plan, and I'm hopeful that the Communications Committee will present a good recommendation, and that more communication will be implemented within the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hobbs. Are there others?
Good evening, Kirk DeMars. Thank you guys for allowing me to speak as well. First, I want to say thanks for seeing you guys honor the teams. I've said in the past, it's been really cool to be here for presentations of the schools and see what's going on in different schools, but it's really cool that you guys, honor the teams, some that go far at states and others that just compete well, whether they go all the way to states or not. It's really cool to see the teams honored here. I guess on that, not in my notes, but just off of memory, one of the young ladies that wasn't here tonight on the equestrian team attends my church. And I've had conversations, with their family, and, their conversations weren't speaking totally negative about the school. It was just, or the district, but just in comments they made it was aware to me that it's not a very well-funded program, at least from within the school. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, that isn't why I said that, but I was just curious. Maybe throw that at your feet. What does it take for us as a district to give them some more resources? Because like the coach said, I do understand these parents had to do a lot more than me as a baseball dad, just going and showing up and seeing my son play baseball. So they had to do a lot more and provide a lot more, not only physically, but financially for that program to be a success. So I guess, what do we got to do as a district, as a community to help them, a little bit more? Because if they're able to accomplish what they did with the backing they had, I'm sure they could probably do a lot more if they had some better resources and funding. Next, on the communications committee update that Ms. Allen provided last week, that was really cool to hear. It was nice to hear some of the things that have been going on within their discussions, things that have actually been taking place in the meetings. Some of the things we overlook, so it's nice to have her bring them to light, such as, for the folks that watch, the meetings either live on the live stream or if it's on a recording, to be able to hear the person saying the pledge, having a mic saying that, something like that I never even noticed. So it's cool to hear, what's going on in there. But relative to that committee, I have some additional observations, questions, comments, things that I took from last meeting, as well as just some thoughts or concerns I have.
30 seconds.
Oh, okay. I'll get to you next time then. But so this process has taken too long, in my opinion. We have a board member voting no on the approval of the meeting minutes. For the last couple months, it just seems to me that she's not getting support amongst the board, because if she's voting no and to not support the meeting minutes every month or every time that I come to a meeting and I watch, it's been going on for a couple months now. This process has taken too long to figure out what we're going to do with these meeting minutes. Whether we're going to go back to the way things, were done before. This is just being drug out too long. Like some other things I've seen since I've been coming to meetings, this decision could be made a lot quicker.
Thank you, Mr. DeMars. Are there others?
Holly Belade. So just wanted to point out, I noticed that the agenda for the last meeting under board issues, I believe, it says communication committee update. Then I happened to look at the minutes from the last meeting and noticed that in the minutes it says Debbie Allen provided the board with an update from the communication committee. That was the minutes, that was the summary. So basically just 8 more words than what was on the agenda to begin with. So it seems to me like the meeting minutes could almost just be replaced with another copy of the agenda at this point, since there was literally no information included. If someone wasn't able to come to the meeting or watch the whole YouTube recording of it, they would not be able to glance at the minutes and get any sense whatsoever for what took place, other than the communication committee update took place, and it was presented by Debbie Allen. That's literally all they could grasp from the minutes. So, again, I just ask that hopefully you consider that the meeting minutes have a little more context to them, like meeting minutes usually do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. Are there others? Thank you for your comments this evening. Next up is routine matters for approval. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 11th, 2022.
Moved by Pharaoh.
Support by Landingham.
It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 11th, 2022. Discussion.
Mr. Sisel, just for clarification, it's more under communication, what we intend to talk about, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Yep.
All right. I just would like my comments to be recorded, and I appreciate the additional comments in there, although I do agree with Ms. Spillane, it'd be nice to have a little bit more detail, just for the official record of the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freight. Others? It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the May 11th, 2022. Ms. Heike?
Landingham,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Freight,
No.
Heika. Yes, sorry. It's been a long day. Kiger,
Yes.
motion carries 5-1.
Next on the agenda is a teacher appointment. I need a motion to appoint the following person to the teaching position listed and the base salary listed effective for the 2022-2023 school year. Ms. Jessica Kishiyama, a behavior specialist.
Moved by Pharaoh.
Support by Landingham.
It's been moved and supported to appoint the following person to the teaching position listed in the base salary listed effective for the 2022-2023 school year. Discussion.
Mr. Sislo?
Ms. Freight?
Thank you. Mr. Gearbaugh, this is our district-wide, correct, behavioral specialist? Or is this as appointed to a specific building?
They're working right now on the plan because we already have, this is the second behavior specialist, and we're also in the process, we have another person that's interested in being part-time. So once we kind of have everybody on board, we'll figure out, and we're trying to more assign them to buildings so that they do have someone there more of the time. That's why we're getting a couple more on staff.
Okay. So is the hope to have like just 2 buildings per, or we're dividing it up once we
Yes.
get the half person in there as well? Okay, thank you.
And we are blessed that this person is a certified BCBA, which is not easy to come by. So we're very excited to be able to bring her on board.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
Any other questions or concerns? It's been moved and supported to appoint the following person to the teaching position listed and the base salary listed effective for the 2022-2023 school year. Ms. Heike?
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Freight,
Yes?
Heika, yes. Kiger,
Yes.
Landingham,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0, 6-0. It's a bad day.
Next up is the budget and finance issues. Mr. Gabriel is going to lead us through a 2022 tax year debt millage rate discussion. A reminder for the public that we will be voting on the debt millage rate at our, we'll have a hearing before our next board meeting on Tuesday, June 7th, and then we will be voting on this debt millage at that June 7th board meeting. Mr. Gearbaugh.
So you have a packet in front of you. We just received some of these documents from PFM in the last couple of days. So if you want to take that out, and you'll see a lot of different highlighted colors. I'm going to go through this in detail. I want to make sure that you fully understand where we are and where we can go. And while you are not voting this evening, we do need some information as to what you would like us to bring to you to vote on at the next meeting. So first, let me explain for the community and some of our newer board members, because we are part of the school bond loan fund through the state of Michigan, we have a mandatory payback date on all of our debt funds. As some of you who have been in the community for a lot longer know, that in 2009, we voted as a community to pay 8.04 mils to pay off that debt. Then we had a housing crash and the taxable value in the community decreased, and we were not going to meet the mandatory payoff date, and the state of Michigan then, in a lame duck session, the legislature passed that the millage rate could be raised as high as 13 mils in order to get the district closer to meeting the mandatory payoff date. There were close to 100 districts that were affected by that, Milan being one of them, and our millage rate for our debt did go to 13 mills. We are required annually to have a financial institution run the calculations that we are going to review tonight to tell us what millage rate we need to collect to make sure that we meet the mandatory payoff. So that's what these documents are, and I'm going to walk you through these. These are the calculations that are then turned into the state that determine exactly what we are going to do and proves that we are meeting the criteria for the mandatory payoff date. So the top form, the first thing I want you to notice is up at the top, total levy 9.9 mils, it's highlighted in green. That's what we are currently charging. So this would be if we maintained 9.9 mils, this sheet documents what that would look like. If you look to the left, you'll see that we are making our final payment in the orange row, which says in 2034, 2035, we will need to collect 7.29 mils, and that will allow us to pay off the approximate $8 million in school bond loan fund debt, and that would finalize all of our debt payments. I highlighted the row above that in purple so that you can see that in 33-34, we would actually make our last bond payment of $3,087,000, and we would pay off the school bond loan fund about $7.5 million. So you can see that that year 9.9 mils collects around $10.5 million, and in that final year we would collect 7.29 mils to pay off the $8 million. So I'm going to stop there for a minute, and do you kind of understand that part of this document? Does anybody have questions on that?
I just want to make sure I understand.
Yep.
So when I look at the column that says growth rate, is that the projected growth rate in the taxable value of the homes that lie within the district?
Yep, that's the next part I was going to explain.
Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead.
You're right where we need to go.
But then when I look at the mills levied qualified debt, if I'm reading this correctly, it seems like we will stay at 9.9 throughout this period and then be able to reduce it to 7.29 in the last year. Is that
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Yep. So over in the yellow and the pink, what you have to do in these calculations, and this is all required by statute, is for the current year, you use the growth rate that we experienced. So this year we experienced 3.18% growth in our taxable value in the Milan area school district. For the next 5 years, you are allowed to use the 5-year running average. That's the 6.18%. And then for the remainder of the debt payoff, you are allowed to use the rolling 20-year average. And right now for us, that's 2.89%. Those numbers, the 6.18 and the 2.89%, are going to come into play, and that's part of what the finance advisor asked me to come to you and explain as you're looking and trying to make a decision as to how to proceed. So you can see, basically, if you look at 22-23 and you have the 644 million in projected tax base, if you multiply that by 3.18% growth, you get the next year's tax base. And then you keep multiplying that year by that growth percentage that you're allowed to use, and that gives you the next year's projected taxable value in the community. That taxable value is then what gets multiplied by the mill rates to determine that we collect enough money to pay off the loan by the mandatory payoff date. So if those growth rates are not accurate and the taxable value doesn't go up enough, then your mills don't continue to pay the debt off in time. Vice versa, if the taxable value grows faster than this, then we collect more funds and we can decrease the rate in coming years. We can never decrease the rate below the 8.04 mils that the community voted on. So once we get to 8.04 mils, we hit that, and if our taxable value grows quickly, then we pay the debt off years earlier.
So Brian, in this last year there when it says I'm sorry, Mr. Gerba.
Yep.
In this last year where it says 7.29, are we still required to collect 8 mils?
No. Nope, you only have to collect, you can't collect. You'd be over collecting and you'd have more than you needed to pay off the debt.
Okay, then I misunderstood your last statement. Okay.
Yeah. So you can't ever levy less than 8.04 until the year where you're paying it off, and then you levy what you have to make the final payment. So I
Thank
should
you.
have clarified
That's
that.
okay.
Yep. So are there any questions on this sheet?
Yes, I think I got lost. This, the pink highlight, the 6.18%, that's the average. What's the 2.89? Why is it dropped?
6.18 is the 5-year
Five-year?
rolling average.
Got it.
And the 2.89 is the 20-year
20-year,
rolling
got it.
average.
Okay, thank you.
And again, the use of those numbers is all dictated by the state of Michigan. You have to use the current value for the current year. You can use the 5-year average for the next 5 years, and then you use the 20-year average for the rest of the loan.
And then does this account, or I assume it doesn't take into account any growth from new building or anything?
These numbers do because the 5 and 20-year average include all taxable value growth.
Okay, I see.
So over the past 5 years or 20 years where we're taking those averages, if the taxable value of all of our homes go up, that helps. And then if we build another 30 homes in the district, that raises the taxable value.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing that's involved in this is the personal property that resides within the district. And as you know, there's a lot of conversation at the state of Michigan about exactly how personal property taxes are going to be collected. So if all of a sudden they determine certain things that are considered personal property right now aren't in the future, that would have a negative effect on our property tax value that we collect the mills on.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yes.
Can you differentiate just one more time so I make
Yep.
sure my notes are clear between the purple and the orange? The purple
Yep.
is the last
The purple
bump.
is the last year prior to payoff year. And so what I wanted you to see that basically in that year, collecting 9.9 mils would raise about $10.5 million. Because we actually make so that column that says UTQ payments, that's us paying off our bondholders. Okay, that's truly the people that bought our bonds, their bonds hit their maturity and we pay them back. The column over on the right that says borrowed or repaid, that's what we're doing with the school bond loan fund. So the nice thing that you will see is that in 22-23, if all goes as projected, that will be the last year that we borrow from the school bond loan fund. And then in that next year, you see we would pay off approximately $850,000. So the reason I put that purple in is I wanted to see you to see in that year it's projected that 9.9 mils would collect about 10.5 million, and that's why we don't need to collect that much that last year. Does that all make sense?
Thank you.
Okay. Now go to this. Oh,
I have a quick question. Are we required to use the 5-year running average of 6.18
Yes.
in years 1 through 5?
yes.
Okay.
Yep, those are all set by statute.
Okay.
If you go to the second sheet, this would be a possibility next year to go from 9.9 mils to 9.75 mils. So you'll see up in the green, I highlighted the 9.75. Okay? And again, all of the rest is the same, but what I wanted to show you here was in the second to last year, we still collect about $10.3 million with the 9.75 mils. That next year, we would have to charge 9.16 mils because we owe the school bond loan fund $10 million that year instead of the $7 million under the 9.9 mils. And basically what this means is if we collect less each of these years, then we don't pay off quite as much, which means we get a little bit more interest added on, and so over time, we end up paying more for the total debt because of the interest that accrues on that extra that we're not paying off by collecting 9.9 mils.
And that's about 380,000.
What's that?
Is that about 380,000?
That's the number I got too.
Yeah. So here's why I wanted to bring this to you in the conversation that I wanted to have with you. So if you go to the next sheet that has a pink and yellow column, and then the 6.18 in pink and the 2.89 in yellow. So I tried to keep this color coded so you can see where that 6.8 transfers over to this sheet and where the 2.89 transfers over to those other two sheets. And you can see the 5 years that are used to get that 6.18. That's that column of 5 numbers highlighted at the beginning of them in pink. And then the yellow line goes down for 20 years, and that shows you how they get the 20-year average of 2.89. The reason I wanted to bring this to you is what you want to look at is this year we had 3.18% in property tax growth. Let's say over the next few years we average 3 to 4% in our property tax value growth. Next year we would drop the bottom number, the 3.41 in the 5-year average, and you would add whatever next year's value is. So if we were in the 3 to 4% range, that's not going to make a big difference with the average because you're going to drop a 3.41 and you're going to add whatever the new rate is. The next year you drop a 7.06. If we replace that with a 3 or a 4 that year, that will affect the 5-year average, which then you go back to this sheet and we're not paying off as quickly and we might not meet the mandatory payoff date. When we don't any longer meet the mandatory payoff date, you will have to raise the millage rate to meet the mandatory payoff up to 13 mils. So I'm bringing this to you to show you that looking at that 5 and 20-year average, there is the possibility that down the road you may have to raise the millage rate. And if you look, you drop a 3.41 and then a 7.06 and then a 7.4 and then a 9.87. And in that 5-year average, when you're only averaging 5 numbers, if you lose 3 to 4 points in 1 year, that comes close to 1% in a 5-year average. I mean, obviously a drop of 5 would be a 1% drop for the 5-year average. So in that year that we dropped the 9.87, if you replaced that with a 4.87, your 5-year average would drop by an entire point.
Okay, I need you to show me where the 9.87 is.
So if you look in the adjusted TV, you see I've got 5 numbers that are highlighted in pink,
Yes,
and then 20 numbers that are highlighted in yellow.
yes.
If you start at the bottom, so next year, the 2018 value, the 3.41, will drop out of the 5-year average, and whatever next year's growth is would replace that with the 5 numbers you're averaging. So eventually, you're going to get to where the 2021, 4 years from now, that 2021 rate of 9.87 would drop off.
But isn't, okay, that's what I thought you were saying. But then, when we're looking at the 20-year average, which is the 2.89, right?
Yep.
It seems like that's also impacted by the 2006 14.04% increase, right?
Yep.
Which will also drop off in 5 years?
Yes. So that's the next thing. So now when you go to the 20-year average, next year if we had a 4%, you'd lose a 3.16 and you'd replace it with 4. Now, when you're doing an average of 20 numbers, a small change like that isn't going to make a major difference in that number. But remember, if you go to those other sheets, that's used for 8 years in the calculations.
And if I'm reading this right, we'll drop the 14.04% before we drop the negative 10.3 and 7.7.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So each year you drop the bottom number in that column and you add the next year. So yeah, you're going to get to, when you drop the 2.06, the 2006 14.04%, and this is the way I look at it. Let's say that year you replace that 14 with a 4, right? You now drop 10 points in 1 year. That's a half a point on a 20-year average.
So in 5 years, we may have to increase the mills?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Now, again, if we get more houses built or taxable values, and here's part of the issue, remember, taxable values are very different than what houses are selling for. Because taxable value is capped. The growth of the taxable value on houses that have been owned by the same owner are capped each year in their growth. So while we hear all of these wonderful things about house values going up and the ability to sell your house for a lot more, if you've owned that house for a long time, that doesn't mean your taxes go up a tremendous amount. And remember, this is taxable value. So the last thing is, going from a 9.9 to a 9.75 basically equates to $15 per $100,000 of taxable value. So I just want to help you understand what that change means. So if you had a house that's being taxed at $100,000, your tax bill would be $15 less next year. If you have a house that's being taxed at $200,000, which means the house value is probably around $400,000 to $450,000, then your taxes would drop by $30. So it's $15 for every 100,000. It's very different when you get to agricultural property. Obviously, agricultural property can be worth a lot more than $100,000, so those $15 start to add up. So I'm not trying to minimize it. So the last page, what PFM did for us, is if you see the line that's, you see the highlighted numbers, and you see the line that's drawn at 2022. There's your 6.18 and your 2.89. Okay, does everybody see that line? And
Yep.
so now you're going to start going above the line. And what he did here is he said, if the taxable value change for the next years through 2030 stayed at 3%. Now that's low, but he just wanted to give an example, right? We were at 3.18 this year. So let's say that stays at 3.0. That gets adjusted for some reductions in taxes and reductions in personal property tax and other things that don't get taxed. So you can see the adjusted taxable value change is kind of between 2.84 and 2.87 over those years. You can see what happens if you start at that line. So if next year we experience 3.0, the 5-year average would be 6.07, and the 20-year average would be 2.87. So they both went down slightly. The next year, if you had another year at 3.0, your 5-year average drops to 5.23, and your 20-year average drops to 2.61. If you have another year where you're at 3.0, and Michelle, to get to your point, I'm sorry, Ms. Heike, to get to your point, you see where it drops from 2.47 to 1.9? That's when that 14 drops off.
Okay.
So we kind of did this. The financial advisor said, look, I'm going to run the numbers for you, and then he sent me an email that had a warning that you really need to talk to your board about what could happen in the future so that, and I'm not trying to sway you in either direction. I'm just trying to help you make a decision with your eyes wide open as to what could happen in the future. And while you get to vote now to possibly lower the millage, if we aren't going to meet the mandatory payoff date, you have to vote to raise the millage. It's not a choice.
But it looks like I mean, this isn't just a possibility at the very end of the bond. This is a real possibility just within the next couple of years. We would have to vote to increase.
It's very possible. Again, there's a lot of, there's a lot of what ifs. If all of a sudden a subdivision of 200 homes goes in, that makes a huge difference. If all of a sudden somebody buys the Ford plant and puts in some type of production there, that makes a huge difference. If we hit a market crash and taxable values go backwards again, and you can see, as much as we all laugh and think that doesn't happen, if you look down in that 20-year average, in 2010, our taxable value dropped by 10.36%. So that's why you start to see that 20-year average start to climb back up a little bit, even if you stay at 3%, because now you start getting rid of some negatives and throwing a 3% in, and that brings you back up. My goal tonight is just to make sure that you guys understand this and that you have your eyes wide open with what you want to have brought to you. So ultimately, at the next meeting, we will bring you the document. That's what's discussed at the hearing at 6:45. And in that document, we need to say, do you want brought to you 9.9 mils, or do you want brought to you 9.75 mils? Recommending what we bring right now is not a vote. It's what's in the resolution. If someone makes that motion and seconds it and it gets voted down, then someone could make the other option. But we need to know what's the document that you want us to bring to you for consideration at the next meeting. And with that, I'm going to turn and say, Krista, did I miss anything?
No. I can bring both documents in 2 weeks. I can have both documents ready. One of them has to be signed that night because the next day it has to be sent to
the taxing units so they can get out tax bills for the summer tax payments. So we don't have, we're bringing this to you now so that either you can discuss it tonight and give us guidance, or at least start thinking about it, because a decision has to be made. We've already had taxing units reach out wondering when they're going to get their numbers.
So what does this have to do? Does this have anything to do with COVID money or ESSER money? Can we use that to reduce this at all?
No. Operating budget and debt fund are two totally different funds. They cannot be intermingled, and funds from one cannot be used for the other.
My recommendation is going to be the 9.75. And if a few years down the road we have to raise the millage, we can at least say to our taxpayers that we have never levied more than what they were legally bound to repay.
I agree with Jan. I think that we save the money that we can save now, understanding that we are bound by the law and that we could have to raise it in the future, but I think we save our taxpayers what we can save at this point.
And I just would point out, and Brian, you were the only one that was around then, that the concern that is being shown with the future of these numbers was not there in 2008 when I said, what happens when everything falls apart? And I was guaranteed that the state had guaranteed, and then the state, under the cover of lame duck, Randy Richardsville legislature decided to change all the rules.
Yep. For those that weren't around, in 2012 in lame duck, the legislature changed the rules of the game in the middle of the game. And we were caught up in that. Like I said, along with about 100 other districts. So, and then these calculations became a lot more important each year. I don't know if anybody else wants to voice.
There's a greater chance of increasing the mill rate if we go with 9.75 at some point down the road, correct?
The less you charge now, the more potential there is. Again, there's a lot of what ifs in here, you know. But yes, you are correct that the less you charge next year, the potential is that. Now, it's not. I mean, if we look on the two sheets, so next year, we would pay off $15,700,504 in both instances in bonds. And that's actually, Krista, if I'm right, we're paying off one of our debt funds. We have three
Yes,
debt
we
funds. That will be the final payment, and we will no longer have three debt funds. We would have two. The difference next year is, instead of borrowing 9.457 million, we borrow 9.551 million from the school bond loan fund. Does everybody see where I'm getting those numbers?
Yep.
So I mean, it's not a drastic difference in 1 year.
Brian, can I say one thing?
Yes.
This is based on the assumption that the numbers provided by the county are accurate. There is one number that we have given PFM to do this calculation that is not guaranteed to be accurate. When I reached out to the county, they said I would have the number by June 6th, which is the day before our board meeting, because that is the deadline for the taxing units to get their stuff into Washtenaw County. So even though it says 9.9 and 9.75, and I truly believe the numbers that we have to get to that 9.75 are what we're going to see as our final number, there is a possibility that that might not be the final number. I don't want to come to you in 2 weeks, and if you're thinking we're going to say 9.9 or 9.75, and I say it has to be 9.77, I want you to know right now there is currently an unknown number. As soon as the county gets it to us, I will either verify that it is the number I provided PFM, or I will get PFM the new number and see what it does to the rate.
So what we were told when we reached out to Washtenaw County, and all of this timing gets very, very tight. But what we were told is there is a county contiguous to Washtenaw County that doesn't have their numbers into Washtenaw County yet. The only way that would affect us is if that's Monroe County. If it's Wayne County, then it affects some other district. If it's Livingston County, it affects some other district. They provided us what they called preliminary numbers because they can't tell us which other county hasn't turned their numbers in.
They can't or they won't?
Probably they won't, not that they can't. My gut is the fact that they provided us preliminary numbers. It's probably not Monroe County that doesn't have it in. I don't think they would have given us, but we can't make that guarantee.
And the number that they did provide us is very similar to what it was last year.
Okay.
So there is a difference, so I know it's not the exact same as last year, but it gives me a little comfort in the fact that probably Monroe County's number is in, because it's not way off from where we were 12 months ago.
And so the tough timeline is we're waiting for these numbers, and in turn, all of the townships and everybody's waiting for us to get them our number, because then they have to get their summer tax bills to their printers to get them distributed to people in July. So this all gets to be a very tight. The good thing is PFM has all of these spreadsheets, and if we reach out to PFM and Paul and RJ there, I would bet within an hour of us getting them a number, they're going to get us the calculations back. So I'm not concerned about that. It's just, when does the county finally tell us these are the locked-in numbers? So thank you, Krista, for reminding that.
Did PFM have a recommendation on what they felt we should do based on all these numbers?
They're not going to make a recommendation. They voiced concern with the potential of having to increase the mill rate in the future.
Mr. Gerbo?
Yes, and I shared that email with Andrew. He saw the concern being voiced to us from Paul Stoddard.
To kind of play off what Tom was saying, though, if we maintain at the 9.9 and continue to kind of pay off, the risk of when we have to raise it could have a potential difference of what we have to collect, correct?
Yes.
So
If you kept it at 9.9
keep it
for
at
one more
9.9.
year, the potential of having to raise it is slightly less.
And the potential of continuing to pay off, help balance is up. Okay, just so they understand, thank you.
What I struggle with every time we have this discussion is providing immediate relief on tax bills versus bracing ourselves for what could come, and including in that paying more in interest because we reduced the immediate tax bill. And so I just want to make sure I understand this right, that if we reduce it down to 9.75 and everything in here remains the same, we'll provide that $15 per 100,000 of taxable value, but in the end, overall, we'll pay almost $400,000 more in interest.
Correct.
Okay.
You're looking at that next column correctly, yes.
And if we levied 20 mills, we'd save a lot more money in interest.
Point taken, we can only levy up to 13. But I understand your point, Mrs. Geiger.
And I guess another point I'm going to reiterate is that when we passed this bond, we guaranteed to our taxpayers that their millage rate would not exceed 8.04 mills.
Yep.
Now, the fact that it went to 13, we had no control over. And if we lower it to what they're legally obligated to pay, 9.75 possibly, and it has to go back up again, we are still only levying what they're legally obligated to pay.
Correct.
I think what we know with absolute certainty is that the numbers are not going to come out exactly how they are in this sheet, right?
Absolutely.
The growth rate is not going to stay at 6.18% for the next 5 years and then be 2.89 for the following however many. So our only certainty is that we don't know what's going to happen.
Yep.
And I keep thinking of, the old saying, a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. And that's why I think that we give the tax break that we can when we can. And then, like Jan said, if we have to increase it in the future, we're doing what we're obligated to do by statute. But I think that when we have the opportunity to help the community, I think our obligation is to help the community. We had this discussion, I don't remember how many years ago it was. And I remember Jan made the exact same point, and I disagreed with her that time, and I've kicked myself probably 100 times since because I think I made the wrong decision then. And listening again to I'm more experienced now, I have a little more knowledge about the information that's on this page, and I think that we owe it to our community to allow the tax relief when we are able to give it.
I don't disagree with you on that point. But what I struggle with is I also feel like I owe it to the community to be a good steward of the future, so that, while I give you 0.15 relief now, I don't in 5 years have to come back and increase it by 0.25 or 0.3 to make up for this short relief. And that's the part I always struggle with, because I want to keep the tax rate as low as we can, but I also want to brace for what inevitably will be, a turbulent real estate market. And so that's what I worry about, is that I understand all of your points that, if I have to vote to increase the mills by 0.4 in 6 years or 7 years, I'm still only levying what I'm legally obligated to levy, but then I worry that people will get smacked with that tax bill that year that they weren't necessarily anticipating. And so I struggle with, is it better to kind of ease our way through this and try to guard as best I can against that huge increase, or is it better to give some relief now? And I just I don't know what the best answer is. And I struggle with paying more in interest than we have to. I really struggle with that, because while we're giving some increase or some relief now, in the end, we will be asking our community to pay $400,000 more in interest for that relief now.
I think Michelle captured what my concerns are. Is this something that you have to know tonight, today?
If we're not given like Krista said, we can bring both documents, and then someone can make a motion on one or the other, and if it passes, then that's what we do, and if it fails, then someone makes a motion on the second document, and we move forward with that.
I would like to bring both documents, because I'd like an opportunity to just kind of digest this, and inevitably over the next 2 weeks, I assume people will see many of us at Kroger and on the baseball and softball and soccer fields, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk with community members to see, just what they think about what kind of relief they'd rather have.
I would agree with Mrs. Heike. I think it's good for us to mill it over, and if it's not too much work for Krista, to have both documents and potentially whatever, hopefully no other numbers, to have those options, something that we should consider.
All right, Mr. President, then we will bring option A and option B.
Yeah,
If they're going to shift from 9.9 to 9.75, we will communicate that with you as soon as we know that.
So I appreciate everybody's weighing in on this. And I did, like Mr. Gearboss said, I saw the concern from PFM. I guess I also want to try to understand better the orange highlight in the mills levied qualified debt for the last payment. Then that's what we're talking about, if we have to, you know, we have to pay off, do a large payoff. I mean, the fact that 9.16 isn't it's not greater than 9.75.
Correct.
That's where I would be more concerned if that was projected to be above 9.75. And I can appreciate both the comments regarding saving interest and getting back to closer to the 8.04. So I appreciate the history that Jan provides, and you know, as well as what we want to do to help avoid interest. Personally, just based on that 9.16 not being above 9.75, I could see where we would start to move towards, we could move towards the 9.75.
You're right, you have a little wiggle room still
Right.
in that last year.
Right. So, but obviously, yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously, you just got, like you said, you just received these and as quickly as you could, and you got them to us. So I think if we can, obviously, people are going to hear about this, and we can talk to others in the community. I mean, it's just like anything with your mortgage. Some people like to pay it off early. Some people like to take the whole 30 years. There's no right way. It's just the way that things are done. So we can get that feedback and go from there.
I have one more question. Did PFM give any commentary on how they thought the rising interest rates and inflation that we're all experiencing now will impact these growth numbers?
They did not talk about the way that affects the growth numbers, but there is the possibility that can affect the interest rate on the school bond loan fund. And you can see up at the top of both of these sheets right now, they are making the assumption, if you look up in the box on the right, it says school bond loan fund interest rate 3.5%. The state can set that rate and alter that rate. So it could affect that, but we have no way of, again, that's why I said on these sheets, there are so many moving parts that, you know, it's hard to say, and you're right. You know, and we all know that bond rates are affected by interest rates now. Our bond rates are locked in because we sold the bonds with a certain guarantee. But the school bond loan fund interest rate can change. I think it's I think based off of some factor. So the legislature can't just change it at will. It's based off of some index.
But could you ask them if they have information related to how rising interest rates impact the growth of taxable value? Because if interest rates continue to rise and that's going to slow the housing market, then that's going to slow the growth of the taxable values.
Right.
Maybe even more so than what they've kind of projected, unless they've already taken that into account. I guess that's my question too.
They don't take that into account. The only thing that they're allowed to take into account is what's the 5-year average and what's the 20-year average.
Okay.
They can't do any forward projections. I think you're right. There is the possibility that if interest rates climb quickly, and here's the effect that it could have. If interest rates climb quickly, so not as many houses sell, you don't have as many houses come off of the cap. Because remember, every time a house sells, that house comes off of the property tax value cap. And that then helps our taxable value go up. You know, the other thing to remember, and this is not in these numbers, is we have 30 to 40 new homes that I would assume have not quite sold yet, but they're being built and sold. So that will have an effect on the property tax value in the years to come as well. I mean, we know off of Arcona, and then also over in Eagle Springs, we've got 2 subdivisions where they are adding houses. So again, my goal was to not necessarily make a recommendation or try and push you in one direction. It was to make sure you understand the sheets, understand the calculations, understand the risk. I just wanted to make sure that you go into this eyes wide open, and we will bring both documents to you at the next meeting, and it'll give you some time to digest it, and then someone can make a motion for one or the other.
And just again, so the public knows, there is a tax hearing before the meeting on June 7th. So,
And there's a public comment then, so people can come, right, and express their views on which route we should go.
Yep, the public hearing is the time for the community to specifically voice their feelings about that tax rate prior to going into the meeting where you will then vote.
Okay.
Yep. If you come up with any other questions between now and the next meeting, please let me know.
thank you, Mr. Gerbaugh. Next up is the 2022-2023 WISD budget resolutions as an attachment C1, C2, C3, and C4. I need a motion to adopt the resolution in support of the 2022-2023 WISD budget as included in attachment C1, C2, C3, and C4. This is we've had a first reading of this already, so I need a motion.
So moved by Freight.
Support by Farrow.
It's been moved and supported. Any other questions since our first reading of this? All right, it's been moved and supported to adopt the resolution in support of the 2022-2023 WISD budget as included in attachments C1, C2, C3, and C4. Ms. Heika?
Sislo.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Freight.
Yes?
Heika, yes. Kiger.
Yes.
Landingham.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, the next slate of business is the first readings of the budget amendments for the general fund, the debt funds, the food service budget, and the student school activities budget. So Mr. Gerbaugh and Ms. Hendricks will walk us through that. So 2021, 2022 general fund budget amendment as an attachment D.
Okay. A couple months ago, I came to you and you approved a budget amendment for the second time this school year. This one is our final amendment for the 21-22 school year. Attachment D is the general fund budget. Since the most recent amendment, we have received an additional, or I am budgeting an additional $244,000 in revenue, and I'm decreasing our expenditures by almost $100,000. So we would have an overall impact of revenues over expenditures by $250,000. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I am changing the expenditures by 500 or 5,900. I picked up the wrong number in my previous statement.
I'm sorry, you're decreasing expenditures by 5,000?
5917.
5917.
Yep. So the overall impact on our budget would be an increase of revenues over expenditures by $250,000. The changes in revenue reflect some changes to grants with offsetting expenditures. In reviewing the income for our athletics program, I'm increasing income to more accurately reflect where we are year to date. Since our last budget amendment, we have received some adjustments to our ORS payments in the amount of $113,000. If you look at the second page, I'm sorry. This is the detail that I'm going over at this point. We received additional foundation for the ECA students with an FTE over 1.0. That expenditure was included in the last amendment, but the revenue is just now hitting. I wanted to make sure that the state had that in place before I changed our revenues. I am increasing the transfer from our food service fund by $20,000. This is something that we are able to do this year because we are substantially adding to our food service fund balance, which we will get to with a further attachment. And then there are a few miscellaneous adjustments. So the total change in revenue would be $244,560. In the expenses, I am increasing the health insurance expense amounts to account for higher reimbursement of claims. The way our health insurance is set up, we pay a premium plus a portion of the employee's reimbursable claims. Our actual usage this year has gone up, so I am accounting for that with this amendment. I am reducing the teacher consultant budgets for 2 teachers that left during the year, but I did not reduce it earlier because I was not sure if we were going to be able to fill those positions. At this point, we're not going to have anybody in those positions for the rest of the year. I'm reducing our professional development budgets to more closely reflect where we actually stand with expenses for professional development. And there are some miscellaneous adjustments that, when everything is all said and done, we're decreasing our expenditure budget by the $5,917. With this amendment, I am estimating that we will be using $1,976,158 of fund balance to give us an estimated fund balance of $3,948,582.
And is this percentage on the front of 10.52 where we'll end, or is it the 12.9?
The 10.52 is the unassigned.
Okay.
So in total, it's 12, but we have that section of fund balance items that have been set aside for programs that you approve before we get to this stage. So our unassigned balance will be the 10.52.
Krista, I have a couple of questions about the revenue adjustments. First, can you remind me what ORS reform is?
Office of Retirement Services. It is all the retirement cost for any school district employees.
Got it. And then I am quite sure I ask this question every year when we see the ECA adjustment. Can you explain that to me one more time?
This ECA adjustment, every district is funded on a full FTE per student. So that's assuming if you have a 7-hour day, your kid is taking 7 hours at the high school. With the ECA program and the nature of that program, the students can take more college level classes to bring their FTE up over the 1.0. So if I'm a college student and I take summer classes, which is what this reflects, the district in turn will get more than the 1.0, which is where this revenue is coming in. But with last amendment, we also had a bill from ECA asking for all of that back because we pay ECA for the college class. So even though it's showing up as a revenue, it already showed up as an expenditure. Big picture, it's kind of a wash. The only reason we get it is because a student took more than a full class load.
Got it.
And early college programs are the only programs in the state of Michigan that are allowed to collect more than 1.0 FTE for a student.
Yeah.
It's a very small carve-out for early college alliance programs.
So the state is funding those students at a higher FTE than general ed students?
Yes. That was passed in legislation, Krista, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe?
It's relatively recent.
Yeah.
there are no more questions on the general fund, I'll move on to attachment E. Attachment E is the final amendment for our debt funds for this school year. I'm just amending the revenues to more accurately reflect where the money came from that we used to pay our debt millage. The first page that you see of attachment E is a summary. It's all 3 debt funds combined. And then behind it, there's a page for each debt fund that will roll into the total on the first page. And basically what you're seeing is I had to borrow less from the state. We had more in our fund balance going into this year, so I didn't have to borrow as much to make our debt payments.
Brian, I'm sorry to go back, but can I ask a question about the teacher consultants?
Yes.
Did we post those positions?
Yes.
then? Okay.
They've been posted, and we've been seeking, as is every district in the county, seeking teacher consultants.
Okay.
And so that's why we kept it in the budget, because our goal was to get them filled. But at this point, with only 13 days of school left, we don't believe we'll be filling them before the end of the year. Any questions on the debt funds?
The next attachment is attachment F. It is our food service budget, final amendment for the 21-22 school year. I am increasing our revenues by $361,000. That is due wholly to the fact that all of our students were treated as free students and all meals were reimbursed at a higher rate than they would normally have been, and that has to do with the COVID relief that US Ed has granted the districts. I'm also increasing the expenditures to more accurately reflect some of the costs that we had in the program and to account for the additional $20,000 that we will be transferring out of food service and into general fund. And you can see we started the year with a fund balance of $68,000. I'm estimating that we will end the year with a fund balance of $362,000. One thing about the fund balance in the food service funds, we are limited as to what our fund balance can be. So if we, at the end of the year, submit everything to the state and our fund balance comes in higher, we will have to have a spend down plan. Brian and I have already talked about it. There are pieces of equipment in all of our kitchens that we could use the spend down plan to replace. We are, with this year, we are in a spot where we can afford to do that. So if we are the recipient of spend down finding, we do have already started talking about how it can be addressed.
Can we also address it by reducing the cost of a lunch? I know there are rules about that, but.
Actually, right now, we are charging the minimum amount that we are allowed to charge based on the calculations we have to do off of what we get for free lunches.
Right.
So we can't lower it unless the federal government comes out with new calculations that allows us to lower it.
But is there a danger that after next year, when we go back to not everyone receiving free lunch, that we will have to increase that to make up for it being so low for so long?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
What you see is if you look at these top numbers, and this is what really shows it, we're decreasing the local revenue by $191,000. That's the money that our students pay for lunches. So because we didn't really sell very many lunches, we're dropping that by 191. The difference is the federal government, because every meal was free, we have more students taking lunches. And so that revenue increased by over $500,000. So our concern with next year is, and you're going to see this in the preliminary budget for food service for next year, we're going back to our projections of selling the number of lunches that we were selling pre-COVID. Because we assume that every student that's getting free now isn't going to continue to buy next year when they have to pay. So we can monitor the lunch price, and again, we only raise that lunch price when we absolutely have to meet the federal government requirements. I don't have a concern right now about having to raise it. We will know more at the end of next year when we see where our sales come in when all of the free meals go away. Does that help answer your question?
It does. I just, again, I want to brace for increases when things get back to the way they used to be.
And I will tell you, we would have no intent of spending all of that fund balance on equipment. We would only spend it, if they say you can only have a fund balance of $312,000, then we've got $50,000 to go purchase some steamers and some ovens and some of that type of thing. I would not spend more than we are required to spend, because I'm like you, I'd like to keep that fund balance respectable so that if we did have a year, I don't like to raise lunch prices mid-year. I'd rather get through the year, and if we used a little bit of that fund balance, then we could look at lunch prices the next year. We have to set them by the state or by the federal requirements once a year. And so I like it when we set them, we leave them for the year. And so I'm with you. I don't want to bring that fund balance down too much, because we could see drastic changes next year in our food service. And having some fund balance there would allow us to not have to make adjustments mid-year.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions on food service?
The last budget for the 21-22 school year, attachment G, is the student or school activity fund. If you will remember, this one was just added as a major fund, or as a fund for the district a few years ago with some GASB changes. In the past, this has always been something that we've had but never had to be reported in our audit. The original budget that I brought to you 12 months ago, I estimated a $350,000 revenue and a $350,000 expense. None of these dollars hit general fund. Anything that comes in from a program is spent only by that program. So I at least tried to keep revenues and expenditures equal as best as I could. With this amendment, I looked at where we currently stand to date. I'm anticipating our revenues to come in about $380,000, and our expenses, I'm budgeting at $375,000. Looking at actual usage, there is a difference, there's a gap between what's coming in and what's going out, and I wanted to reflect that in this budget.
So am I understanding correctly that this $626,000 that's in the fund balance, this is actually assigned to various teams for them to spend?
Yes, each building has their own internal account. So
Okay.
Paddock has an internal account that they'll use for field trip fees.
Yeah, the high school, you've got
High
student
school has-
councils, you've got
yeah.
sports, you've got
every
clubs.
sport, some of the classrooms, like our school store has an account. So
I
it's
hear-
money that they raise for their programs, and it stays here in their programs. We don't touch it for a district expenditure.
Do we encourage them to spend it? I'm kind of wondering why we're sitting on $626,000.
I know it looks like a lot, but when you break it down into all the accounts, it really comes down to a lot of the accounts keeping $2,000 or $3,000 as a fund balance. So there are a few accounts that are a little bit larger, and Krista and I are meeting with those groups and those principals to talk about how, not maintaining that level of fund balance. But most of our student groups it's a pretty minimal fund balance.
For
Under
ins-
$5,000 for almost everything.
For instance, part of this would be the robotics fund, and they do a lot of fundraising so that they can buy stuff for next year's robot, or they can pay for registrations. So at this point, their fundraising money might be there, but they'll be spending it down next year. Most of these accounts do not carry a big balance. I can tell you robotics, our FFA, I'm sorry, has a nice fund balance for the program, but Josephine's always putting that money back into her program too. It's just, sometimes it's a timing thing, where we've spent a lot throughout the year, but with FFA, the greenhouse is bringing in money right now that probably won't be spent out by the end of the year. And the football or the swimming or all of the different sports that have money, they do fundraisers throughout the year, and then when it comes time for their athletic activity, they'll be spending the money, but they might be building it up in the spring to spend in the fall.
Do you know right offhand, does the equestrian team have an account? Do you know?
I do not know off the top of my head. I can get that information to
Okay.
you.
Can we get a list of all of the accounts?
Sure.
Sorry, Krista.
No,
I just
that's
am interested
fine.
to see what they are and
Actually, if you look at the board packets, the financial statements, I give you a balance sheet on each of the internals. So there's a paddock, a Simons, a
That's
middle
where it
school,
is?
and the high school.
Okay.
All of those accounts, that is what's reflected in this.
Okay, I'll look there, thank you.
So I can give you that information. I will look into the equestrian, but you do have access to it in Dropbox.
Mr. Gearby, I believe this is where you told me I need to ask Krista if she could print that off? Right, when I've asked for a print off before, because,
Yeah, we'll get you a print.
okay, I just wanted to be able to ask you if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that. And just to expede on, I mean, I know that Andrew knows about soccer and Michelle knows about swim. To back up Krista, robotics competitions are like $5,000 a pop. So and they have to go in to just to register, and they have to compete, go into 2 at least. So they need to keep a good 10, 15 grand in theirs to even be able to compete. So they might be one of the higher groups, but they have a big expense to even compete. They pay $5,000 for each event when they register. It's my understanding. I don't know if it's gone up, but that's what it used to be.
Are there any more questions on the 2021, 2022 budget amendment? The next,
Yeah, so the next slate is we're going to get into the 2022, 2023 preliminary budgets for just the very similar things that we just had the final amendments for. So take it away.
Attachment H is the general fund preliminary budget. You will see that I am reducing our revenues from the budget that I just gave you. So the first column on this is the June amended. It is the numbers that we just went over and what you will be voting on next meeting. The proposed budget for 22-23, I'm estimating a reduction in revenues by $85,140. And I am estimating at this point an increase in expenditures of $6,580, if you look about 2/3 of the way down the sheet.
I'm sorry, where's that at?
It says right
Oh, I
above where
see.
it says excess revenue.
Yep, sorry.
If you look at the next page, there's an explanation of what I think, what makes up these changes. I am,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Just the $230,000 for health insurance, does that go into pupil support services? Or where would that, where would the 200
it's going to be spread all over.
spread out all over? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
When you look at the second page, some of those numbers would be specific to a certain line on the first page, but something like health insurance, because it affects everybody in the district, would be spread throughout all the line items.
Thank you.
I am estimating a decrease in the grants, revenues and offsetting expenditures of $548,376. That reflects the inclusion of ESSER 3 funds, but the elimination of all of the other COVID grants, the ESSER 1, ESSER 2, anything that we've had through this year. It is also the elimination of some carryover monies that we had for certain grants this year. In looking at the property tax information that I've received, and I know that some of the numbers are still not updated, I'm at this point reducing the estimated property tax revenue by $26,000. For our foundation estimate.
Can I ask why we're reducing the property tax revenue by $26,000?
Based on the taxable value information that I am able to pull as of last week when I was doing this, the calculation came out to reducing it.
How does that feed into what we were just talking about the bond payments?
Part of the numbers I have not been updated from last year, but I can only go with what the counties enter into the taxable value website.
Okay.
So when all of the updates have been made, that number should go the other way.
Okay.
It's all a timing and when people enter things into the places they have to enter them.
Some of the numbers I'm looking at were last entered in April of '21. Now we're in May of '22, and I have no way of guessing what they should be.
No,
So
I'm not. I just wanted to make sure I understood why that number was going down.
Yeah, it seems out that we
despite
just said
our
the growth was
previous
3.18%. And
Yeah.
Nope, I understand the question, yep.
I am proposing the adjustment of the foundation allowance. We are assuming a $400 per pupil increase, which is somewhere between what the House, the governor, and the Senate have recommended. It is lower, honestly, than what the governor and the Senate recommended, but it's it's substantially higher than what the House did. So until we get a final word out of Lansing as to what our foundation increase is going to be, we chose to be conservative and use a $400 per student increase.
We do discuss that with a lot of other districts because everyone's doing their preliminary budgets right now. And we seek advice from MASA, MASB, and MSBO, all of the state organizations. The revenue consensus also came in very high, but there are also talks in Lansing about tax cuts. So there's a lot, again, the negotiations we were told at our legislative coffee that we had via Zoom. I know Andrew attended that. I can't remember if any of the other board members were there. We were told by state legislators that they plan to have a budget to us between June 15th and June 30th. So hopefully by June 30th, we'll have what that per pupil increase is and what some of our other grants are. Because remember, and this always happens, the governor's proposal is going to have a per pupil increase and then a lot of other projects. The Senate and the House each do the same thing. They have passed those bills back and forth enough times now that they can say they're not going to have anything to vote on. And this is the process they do every year. And so it gets sent to committee, and the committee will, the leaders of each of the two chambers and the governor will get together and they hammer out a deal, and then they come out and the two chambers vote on it. So 400 is low compared to what we are being told, but we didn't feel comfortable going any higher than that for the preliminary budget.
Mr. Grable?
Yes.
If I may, when we're doing the FTE count, there's a percentage, right, that we take so much of the fall count and so much of the February to come up with that estimate. Can you refresh me on the percentages of how we
Yep, so we're basing this budget on 1,900 students for the fall count, which is 90%. And then we would use the 1,911.29 students for the 10% for the spring count. So we're using a decrease of 11.29 students, but in the budget, we have a blended count that's blended between 1,911.29 and 1,900.
But don't we decrease it by 11 because we're down? Am I
No.
I'm reading down 11?
Kirsten, our
Yes.
February count was 1911.
Thank you. Okay.
Our projected fall count is 1,900.
Thank you. That's where I was getting confused. I was looking, I appreciate that, Krista. Okay, so our projected account that we're looking at is the 1911.
1911 is what we were in February.
When we receive our foundation, it's based on last February and next fall.
Which we don't know yet.
So
we're
last
making-
February was 1911, and that would be the 10% that Mr. Gearboss spoke of. And then we are estimating a decrease to 1,900 in the fall, which is down 11 from our February count. And that
We
would
take
be
90% of that.
90% of that.
Thank you. I apologize. I appreciate the clarity.
And how did we come up with the 11.29 decrease?
We look at the trends of graduating class size versus kindergarten class size, the trends in schools of choice, and come up with what we believe we will be at.
And we're just kind of guessing on that right now, correct, Mr. Gerlach, because we are still waiting for our kindergarten enrollments and all that, doing our best, right?
Yep.
Okay, which is, thank you.
So based on the $400 per pupil and the adjusted count, I'm budgeting a $325,000 increase to revenue. There were some state aid adjustments. This current year, we had a negative special ed adjustment, a couple other items that in reversing them, the state aid, I'm estimating is going to increase by $167,000. There were some miscellaneous adjustments. So in total, I'm suggesting that our revenue will decrease by $85,140. I am proposing at this time a total increase to our expenditures of $6,580. Part of that is the grants with offsetting revenues that I had spoke about earlier. I'm reinstating professional development budgets to where they were at the beginning of this year on the assumption that one more year away from COVID, we will be back to being able to send staff to professional development opportunities. I'm assuming a 10% premium increase in our health insurance rate. In the past, I have used that 10% number. Some years came in higher, some came in lower. This most recent year, we did come in higher than the 10%. So at this point, because we're so far away from our open enrollment, I can't reach out to Blue Cross and ask for a number. We are going to continue to do the 10% as an increase. I'm reinstating the budget for the non-special education social worker that was removed from the current year budget due to the fact that it was not filled. I am budgeting for new behavior specialist, the one that you just approved tonight, and a part-time one to help support all of our students in the district. We are eliminating the cost of the Celine Young Adult Program. With the end of this school year, we will no longer have students at Celine Young Adult. All of our special ed young adult students will be in our Milan program. The current year budget has one full psychologist and a partial year for another one. I am increasing the budget to account for that partial year, so we will be budgeting for 2 full social work, or psychologists. There are a number of other adjustments to bring us up to a change in expenditures of $6,580. And this will,
Krista, when you are estimating a 10% increase in the health insurance, does that already account for the increased spend that we just saw in the amended budget?
yes.
Okay, okay. And then this non-special education social worker, is that, I'm just confused as to what that is.
We, as a district, we have a special education social worker in each building, and we have posted for, and we have currently filled this position. It's going to be a district-wide social worker. For the first 2 years of this position, they're going to be, hopefully, in the 11T grant, working with our population of students that qualify for 11T funds. So helping parents with services that, because our special ed social workers are limited as to who their caseload is, and they're also limited by what they can do in a day, this person will have more time to work with parents to find resources either within the district or outside of the district, help them make the contacts with Aid in Milan or other organizations so that they can get non-educational supports also.
Okay.
In looking at the changes in revenue and the changes in expenditure, I am anticipating that we will be using $91,720 more in fund balance. Sorry.
No, that's great.
A change to fund balance between last year and this year of 91,720, with an estimated fund balance of $1,880,704.
So the concern there is that this leaves us unassigned fund balance of 3.73%.
Right, and the number that we compare to is the 6.17%. But that is right now projected to be under 10%. What we are waiting for, we need to see the audit for this year and where our fund balance ends this year. As you know, we historically have had a little bit better fund balance outcome in the audit than we did in the final amendment. That also then, if it changes this year, rolls into next year because next year's budget is based on this year's budget. We're also being given information that the foundation allowance increase is going to be more than $400, but we didn't want to build that into the budget. And we're going to also have to watch our pupil count very closely. I've had conversations with the building administrators already that if some of those numbers don't happen appropriately, then we will be making the necessary adjustments to the preliminary budget to make sure that we are closer to that 10% fund balance at the end of next year.
Mr. Sislo.
Mr. Farrow.
Yeah, just a brief comment just for the community. It is a big spend out of fund balance, and that's a result of in large part, the new contracts that we negotiated last year. So, I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but I am very mindful of the spend and the fact that the fund balance is anticipated to be less than 10%. Brian is correct. We will need to look and consider our pupil counts. Right now, the estimated number is 1,900. At this point last year, we had budgeted 1,978. So the pupil count is something that we'll have to take a look at. I do want to qualify what Brian said too, in that the revenue assumptions on foundation allowance are very unclear right now. I think it was mentioned earlier, but I've got some information here. The executive branch is indicating $435 per pupil, and that would bring the foundation increase up to $91.35. The House is projecting $300. That would increase the foundation by 5%. The Senate version is $450 per pupil, which would be a 5.2 increase to $91.50 per student. So I know one of our community members had asked earlier, do we know what the foundation amount's going to be? And the answer is no. This is a very conservative approach. I think it's the appropriate approach in terms of budgeting the $400 increase. But yeah, I think it's safe to assume that we are going to be looking very carefully at pupil counts. So, thank you.
One thing that I will add, when Andrew and I attended the legislative coffee on Monday morning, it was real interesting to hear the legislators from both sides of the aisle voice that now that basically the three budget proposals are the political budget proposals, and that now they will get down to working on the practical budget proposals. It was very interesting. It's the first time I've heard them say that, and it was members of legislature from both sides of the aisle that said these budgets were very politically driven, and that now that it goes to committee, they get down to the practical work on the budget.
At the legislative coffee, was there any discussion on how this petition drive to provide tax breaks for scholarships would impact the general fund and school aid fund, and how that might impact the per pupil funding?
We did not have any discussion on that at this legislative gathering, but we have in the past. Any other questions on the general fund preliminary budget for 22-23?
The next document in front of you, attachment I, is the 22-23 debt fund preliminary budget. This was built on the assumption of a 9.9 levy. I needed a number, and that's the one I chose. It will be adjusted. The debt funds normally pretty much budget in what we budget out. The debt payments will not change. The $15 million that we are paying out is what we are required to pay out. The difference will be if we change from the 9.9, which we're currently levied, to a 9.75 or something other than 9.9, there will be a variance between the local and other funding sources, because we will be getting less in local dollars and we'll have to be borrowing more. So I can bring that information to you at a later date. So the first document, as with the other one, the first page is a summary. The next three are each of the individual debt funds. Are there any questions on the debt funds? Okay. The next document, attachment J, is our food service budget. As Mr. Gearbois stated earlier, we are bringing our proposed revenues back into line with where they were pre-pandemic, with the assumption that students will be now paying for lunches as opposed to everybody eating free. So I am increasing the local revenue from the $10,000 that was in the proposed budget to $176,000. I'm eliminating the state budget because that is money that we may or may not get, and it changes from year to year as to what the dollar amount is. So it will be reinstated in the future if we do receive those funds. and I am taking the federal revenue back down to a more pre-pandemic number. I am still assuming a $40,000 transfer between food service and general fund. Just for historical information, that is about what we have transferred pre-2021. Last year, our fund balance fell low in food service, so we did not take a transfer. This year, I was not sure where it was going to be, so the original budget was $20,000. But we had been running near $40,000 in the transfer between the two funds. And that is based on a calculation that I have to do, looking at what the expenditures for the program were. We are only allowed to have a certain amount that we can transfer back into general fund.
Krista, one quick question on this. This assumes we keep the current staffing
Yes.
levels. So just to explain, this year, at both of the elementary schools, we had to add an additional lunch personnel because the number of meals being served went up drastically because of the free-for-all. And so right now, we're assuming that staffing stays. If our sales go down and we don't need that additional person, then we will look at using that person in a different way in the district. But we wanted to be realistic with the budget because we don't know exactly when, we're going to have to look at lunch counts, look at staffing, look at how quickly we can serve students, and then determine whether we can decrease staffing or not. So we left it at current levels, even though we brought the meals sales down until we know for sure that we aren't going to need those additional lunchroom staff. So there is the possibility that we wouldn't necessarily use that much fund balance next year. It's just something that's going to have to play out in the first few months of the school year.
Are there any questions on the food service budget?
Krista, I have a quick question for you. Does this, on the local revenue, does that include any potential increase for what students might be paying for food with what we're going to be talking about in attachment L?
No, the local revenue, the $176,000 is similar to what we have received in the past, so it wouldn't reflect any changes in meal pricing. The number could go up, could go down based on actual usage. If we have more students decide to buy their lunch instead of bring their lunch, the number will fluctuate. But in order to come up with my proposed budget, especially because we've had 2 years of very unusual food service expenditures, I kind of went back to where we were in 18-19 and the beginning of 19-20.
Okay, thank you.
And the last attachment, attachment K, is the Student and School Activity Fund budget. Based on trends for the last 3 years, since this kind of became a reportable fund, our numbers have been going up every year. So I am budgeting for a revenue of $400,000 and an expenditure of $400,000. We will be hopefully back to a normal year next year, post-pandemic, and we will have more activity in some of the programs that we may not have had people participating in the past. So I'm anticipating the number will go up, but as we get into the year and things become a little more evident, I will come back to you with new numbers.
Great, thank you, Krista and Brian. So again, these are all first readings. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to Mr. Dearbaugh or Ms. Hendricks in regards to those, and we will be voting on these at our next meeting. Next on the agenda is the 2022-2023 Food Service Management Company contract renewal. I need a motion to to renew the food service management contract for the 2022-2023 school year with Chartwell School Dining Service Management Company as described in attachment L, and further to authorize the superintendent or designee to sign all necessary documents.
Moved by Farrow.
Support by Landingham.
It's been moved by Farrow and support by Landingham. Discussion?
Just quickly, as I said in the information for you, we are in the middle of a 5-year contract. That contract allows a couple of areas to increase by an index. That index this year was actually 7.7%, but our contract states that we will do 3% or that index, whichever's less. So by having the contract in place, we are not seeing our costs increase by 7.7%, but instead increase by 3% for next year. The one area that we don't control that increase is the one portion that's increasing by 4.4%, and that's the equivalent meal factor, which we have no control over that. That's set by the state of Michigan. So ultimately, some fairly small increases compared to what they would have been if we weren't in the middle of a 5-year contract with a cap on how much our costs can go up. For us, honestly, that 3% is on our management fees and there's one other, monthly, the administrative fee. So the management fee and the administrative fee are the two places that are affected by that 3%. And you can see those are pretty small portions of that budget.
Any questions or concerns? Right, moved by Farrow, support led by Landingham to renew the food service management company contract for the 2022-2023 school year with Chartwell School Dining Service Management Company as described in attachment L. Further to authorize the superintendent or designee to sign all necessary documents. Ms. Heika.
Farrow,
Yes.
Freight,
Yes?
Heika, yes. Kiger,
Yes.
Landingham,
Yes.
Sislo.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Right, next on the agenda is board issues. So communication committee update. We did meet last Monday. I appreciate the comments by Mr. DeMars. I can understand the perspective that it does seem to be taking a while. I think the committee is starting to, the committee, I would say, agrees with that as well. And Ms. Landingham and Ms. Freight can speak to that as well as they're part of the committee. There will be a formal update from one of the members, Melissa Brown, at the next meeting, but they are starting to do smaller work with themselves as far as breaking up into groups and tackling some of the issues. So in regards to the minutes, we did our April meeting, we had a 2-hour discussion about the minutes. And the people that were at that meeting had a lot of different viewpoints. And we discussed it at length. And then we did come to a consensus at the last meeting where a recommendation was made. We've had some issues. The committee's trying to put together an email communication as was suggested by public comment here. But they did come up with a recommendation. And I'll just read what this was. The MAS School Board Communication Committee met tonight and concluded our discussion on what we recommend for how to move forward with recording people's comments in future meeting minutes. We recommend recording the person's name followed by a brief statement, 1 to 2 sentences, with the viewpoint expressed if appropriate. We do not feel it is necessary for attendees to have to request that their comments be included in the minutes. So I did have a conversation with Ms. Heika in regards to this recommendation. And that's why some of the changes were reflected in the minutes as far as the summary and a viewpoint included as part of that summary. The one part about the recommendation regarding it not feeling necessary for attendees to have to request their comments be included is actually, it's a policy issue, because there's the current policy of the board is 168.1, where it does state that the minutes shall show only action taken and, if requested, remarks of board members, administration, and/or citizens present. So the recommendation from the committee is to not for people not to have to make that request. So I spoke with Ms. Freight, because my thought was to give this to the policy committee, but obviously we wanted to bring this recommendation to the board to see if that's something that we did want to send to the policy committee for to be edited. So right now, that's the current recommendation from the committee, is that it not being necessary for attendees to have to request that their comments be included in the minutes. So is there any thoughts on what we would like to do with that recommendation from the committee?
Just to add a little clarification, a little bit of rationale behind the no longer needing a formal request is they thought, the committee at large thought it was easier on whoever is the secretary to not have to worry about who had requested and who had not. That it kind of revert back to when you make a public comment, that it's always a very brief, short, concise summary included, and there's no need to denote who had formally requested and who did not.
Mr. Sislo?
Mr. Farrow.
I can speak for me. I don't think that it's necessary. You know, if this board wants to change the policy committee can bring it to the board and we can vote on that policy. But from my training with MASB, it is perfectly fine for us to indicate in our meeting minutes that public comments were heard. And I don't think that we have to go beyond that.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow. Others?
I think it was pointed out at our last meeting that there was concern over the accuracy of comments being reflected in written minutes. And I think for this board, the best way to ensure accuracy from anybody reviewing the meeting is to go to the recording and review them word for word.
To kind of expand on that, if I can, Mr. Sislo, I think one of the things that the Communications Committee had, and Amy and Andrew will jump in, I'm sure, is that the official recording of the board's actions is in the minutes. The YouTube video is an add-on, but it's not the official record of the board. The official record of the board is the minutes that are kept in the office. So if you go look and fact check and do the official record, it is the minutes. Apologize for my voice. And that's where you find the official record, I guess, but without reiterating. The YouTube video, we've had issues, with the technology and the sound and those types of things, and I don't know that we have any said policy on how long we're going to maintain YouTube and what we're actually doing with all of our YouTube right now. I think our intent is to keep doing that, but I don't think we have any set policy on that.
Mr. Sislo, I just want to comment again with regard to the meeting
Hold on,
minutes.
Mr. Farrow.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Mr. Farrow.
Again, I just want to restate my own position on the meeting minutes, and that is that they are to reflect board actions. They're to reflect the votes of this body. I'm not sure why it's necessary to indicate one by one somebody getting up at the microphone and speaking and then having all of those comments in our meeting minutes. Again, my perspective was that we were trying to get away from pages and pages of meeting minutes. And I've been I guess I'll request that my comments be in the minutes, that I am fine with the current structure of our meeting minutes. In my opinion, the minutes now reflect a bit more than was requested. The minutes actually include more than what we had previously been doing, and so I think that the meeting minute format's currently fine.
Ms. Hyken?
So I want to make sure we know, we're talking about two different things here. So the meeting minutes, I did receive that recommendation, which was actually accepting the recommendation I had made to the Communications Committee several weeks ago. And so upon hearing that they agreed with that recommendation, I did include more detail in reflecting whether someone supported or did not, whatever the issue was that they were talking about. So I've already implemented that change in the meeting minutes. So if the Communications Committee thinks that they need to go further, or they think I haven't, met what they thought was going to be in the meeting minutes, I'm, open to having that conversation and hope to hear more from them. But my understanding is, based on the recommendation, this is what the committee had recommended. Now the issue about whether or not public comments or board members need to request that their comments be reflected in the meeting minutes, I think that recommendation should go to the policy committee so that the policy committee can vet that issue, and then they can come to the board from a policy position with whatever that recommendation will be.
Other comments?
Mr. Sislo?
Ms. Raitt?
Well, I can agree with the policy and what we need to do. I think that we also need to make note of the fact that prior to the changes, that policy was still in our realm of policies that we've had and been following, yet we didn't necessarily have to use the formal request. So our previous secretaries, when comments have been made and been noted in a very brief, concise summary, it was never necessary to make a formal request. And it's my understanding that the Communications Committee is simply saying to go kind of revert back to that, so there may not be a need to change the policy, in essence, that we go to that short, concise comment, and that there's no necessary need to make the request in order to make it easier for the secretary to denote the comments. So that it's not just noting the people that make the formal request, that everyone is included. So that the secretary doesn't have to only put in the formal request, if I'm not reiterating things.
But if we revert back to not having speakers request that their comments be included in the minutes, and we'll be actually in violation of the policy if the policy committee doesn't vet it and then change the policy. I understand that that's not how we did it before, but as I said when we first made this change, when I became the secretary, I went and reviewed what our policy was to make sure that my minutes complied with the policy. I reviewed the MASB guidance and lots of other guidance. And that's why that specific change in the meeting minutes was made. I personally, as a member of the policy committee, I just think that we need to allow the policy committee to review it, and then they can make their recommendation to the board. But I would not recommend going back to not requiring that request absent a policy change, because then we will be in violation of our policies.
And my recall was that we weren't following our current policy, and there were community members that believed that there were other policies that we weren't following. So my recall was that there was a need for us to get in line with what the existing policy is, and that's exactly what we did. So The fact that this wasn't done previously is that issue is something that this board should not have been doing. And the existing board, the current board, has corrected the issues from the past. So if the policy committee wants to recommend a change, the policy committee comes up with the proposal, brings it to the board, we vote on it. I just want the record to reflect that I don't think that it's necessary. I personally don't think that it's necessary for us to list every single person that got up and spoke. MASB training, the information that I have secured and the time that I've been on this board indicates that what we're currently doing is more than sufficient.
Any other comments?
Mr. Sislo.
Ms. Frey?
I would suggest then, as the policy committee is chaired by Mrs. Heike and Mrs. Landingham and I, and Mrs. Landingham is unfortunately leaving us, the hope would be, I would assume that we would get that meeting under the way and make a recommendation before Mrs. Heike leaves, Mrs. Landingham leaves, due to the process that it takes to replace Mrs. Landingham.
So I'm good with, I'm good with forwarding it to the policy committee for review and recommendation back to the board. So
Are we good with moving forward with the recommendation from the communications committee to include the summaries as a full board? As Mrs. Heike's suggestion was appreciated by the communications committee?
State that again, I'm sorry.
I'm just wanting to know if we have like a full board consensus about moving forward with Mrs. Heike's suggestion to the communication committee, that they also came back and, thought that it was appropriate to have a short, concise summary of the folks that do spoke, and board members and such during the meetings.
So you're just asking board consensus on that?
If that's at all possible.
Yeah, sure. Or you can talk about that as well, for sure. I mean, I think the change was implemented with these minutes, and they were approved.
So we're good moving forward.
I mean, we can definitely talk about it more, but
Well, I'm just wondering if we're good moving forward. Okay.
Well, I guess I would support Mr. Farrell's position that the minutes reflect the actions of the board, and that if someone is interested in seeing what the comments were, we have the technology available for them to view them word for word.
I'm a little confused on the procedure here.
sure.
Does the recommendation of the communications committee went to the secretary, the secretary and proposed to the communication?
Because there's two different items. I mean, one is the it's the matter of the summary and the viewpoint being included.
Right.
So that's there's no policy in regards to that.
So that doesn't require
There's
a
no
consensus or a vote or a...
I don't know of any policy that exists in regards to how those are recorded. There is a policy that says the minutes shall show only action taken and, if requested, remarks of board members, administration, and/or citizens present. So that's the question. I mean, so the recommendation from the committee is that they say we do not feel it's necessary for attendees to have to request their comments be included in the minutes. So if in order to meet that recommendation, this policy would need to be changed. And so that's why this needs to be, if we want to make that, the policy committee needs to bring that to the board for a vote.
Okay, but the level of detail that's included in the minutes, that are requested to be included in the minutes, that is, the secretary can adjust those based on the communications committee without a consensus or a vote from the board. Am I understanding that correctly?
And then the minutes are always approved by the board. So I mean, if the board had an issue with that summary, they could vote no on the minutes and state why.
That
I
makes
mean, if they
sense.
wanted to say, that that I didn't ask for my comment to be included. Why did you include it? They could be struck from the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And to be clear, to add some clarification for the full board, the Communications Committee made it very, very clear that there was no indication of there ever being a word-for-word verbatim transcription, to avoid all the pages, Mr. Fair, that you were referring to. There was an overwhelming consensus that that was not necessary, nor should it be expected.
So is there a recommendation from the committee as to how long the comments from each speaker should be?
I believe Mr. Sislo read it was like 1 to 2 brief statements with
One-
a
yeah.
viewpoint.
The person's name followed by a brief statement, 1 to 2 sentences with the viewpoint expressed if appropriate. So again, with that, I will say that recommendation was already made to Ms. Heike, and she implemented that
Right.
to some degree on these minutes. And we took action on those minutes with what that summary was. And like, I mean, you can speak again. I mean, as far as if there's questions or concerns with that, the members of the committee, we can revisit that if we want. I feel, I mean, that the committee is, I mean, I feel that they feel like they've talked about the minutes quite a bit. I mean, if we wanted to get more into the brief statement or the summary, I think it's really more around this policy change, is what we need to hear back from the policy committee based on this recommendation from the committee. But I mean, if we want to talk more about the summary, I mean, I thought the summary and the inclusion of a viewpoint on these minutes was acceptable, and that's why I voted yes on the minutes.
That is my position as well, that there was a marked change, and what we're producing now is sufficient, yet we still have a board member voting no, meeting after meeting.
And I'll speak to that, Mr. Farrow, if you will. I was more concerned about following the communications committees as far as the formal request, because the comments that were put in were just those that were formally requesting.
Yep, I agree. My point was that Ms. Heike took the recommendation from the committee, made the requested change, and as a board member, you continue to vote no. So again, with all due respect, my assumption is you want more detail. And that's not what I'm hearing from the communication committee. If the communication wants more detail, the communication committee can come to this meeting and tell us that they would like more. But Ms. Heike has done what the committee requested, which is to add additional detail to the latest set of minutes that was approved 5-1 tonight.
If I may?
Sure.
I appreciate your opinion, and as the no vote, I will explain again to clear up the assumption. The committee had had comments about the formal request, so my no vote tonight was in reflection of following the full recommendation from the committee and accepting the brief summary and no longer having to formally request the comments. So there were comments made by individuals that did not remember to do the formal request, and those were not in there, and that is an issue to me that I agree with the Communications Committee shouldn't be an issue. So that is the reason, sole reason, not the length of the comment, not the detail of the comment, but the formal request.
So I believe that we've bumped up against this issue a couple of different times on other topics where our policy doesn't line up with what our actual behavior is, and we have to bring those two in line. So I do believe that this issue needs to go to the committee for a recommendation. The recommendation can be for the change, and I personally think it should be, but I think that it has to go through the correct process to get the policy in line, because we cannot have these issues continuing to bubble up where we're not following our own policies.
So I think we stand, I'm making a request to the policy committee to review policy 168.1 and provided a revision to the board.
As the policy chair, I will get us together and discuss the recommendation and make a recommendation to the board.
All right. So that's the communications committee update. School board vacancy update. Just a reminder for those in attendance and watching that if you are interested, the applications are due by tomorrow, 4 p.m. to the district office at the high school. I checked with the secretary last week. We do have applications for that we will be talking about, and we'll be talking about the process of the interview process regarding that at our June 7th meeting. Kirsten, you did bring up committees and Ms. Landingham. My thought on that was that the person that is nominated would take the positions that Ms. Landingham has on the committees currently. And except for the one with the personnel committee, the person can assume that position. But as far as the chair of that committee, I spoke with Ms. Macchio, and she would be the chair of that committee moving forward. So does anybody have any thoughts or concerns with that?
Thank you.
The one thing that we will have to do, though, is with Ms. Landingham vacating the office of vice president, we will have to have a nomination and a vote on a vice president, and we will do that at the June 22nd meeting as well. So if you're interested, we will be accepting nominations for the VP at the June 22nd meeting in order to fill that position vacated by Ms. Landingham. Any other questions about the vacancy? All right, next up is the Big Red Board Chat. So Thursday, May 12th, Mr. Farrow, Ms. Kiger, and myself, we had a Big Red Board Chat at the Simon's Cafeteria. It was attended by 10 members of the community. There were lots of great questions asked. We talked about the vacancy and about if people are interested in running for the school board in November. So there was a lot of great questions from the community in regards to board service. Personally, I thought it went relatively well. I appreciated the interaction and the two-way communication that we had with the community. It wouldn't have lent itself to how we did it in the past in some type of establishment in Milan. It was better in an area that we could, just because of the amount of people and the questions that we were talking about, it worked well at the cafeteria. So I invite Mr. Farrow, Ms. Kiger to chime in as well. Or not.
No, I can add. I thought it went well. I wish it had been, better attended. There were a lot of questions about. There were questions about like our time commitment as board members. How we handle disagreements. I really thought that the communication, the back and forth communication, I think most people appreciated it. I actually was able to talk to a few community members after, and I thought that was greeted with, I think that was a positive thing.
Yeah, I thought there were a lot of very good questions, and a lot of it made you stop and think, because some of the questions were how we do handle conflict on the board, and some of them were about how we balance being on the board, with being parents or grandparents or whatever in the district. And they're also how we communicate with staff, and how we get to know each building. And so we've got to explain how we divide ourselves up as a board with representatives to each of the buildings. So there were a lot of excellent questions, and I know one of the questions asked what we look for, what we ourselves would be looking for in the person who's going to take Amy's seat. And it was kind of, I think all three of us had the same answer, and all three of us had a different perspective, so, which reflects our board, 7 different people. So I do want to thank all the people that took the time to be there.
Cool. And there were members of the communications committee there, and they provided feedback at the communications committee meeting. So definitely looks like an avenue that we can continue to pursue into the future. So they're also considering some other options to recommend to us as well. So, all right. Any other questions or comments about the Big Red Board Chat? All right, back to public comment. And a reminder, this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you'll be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning and ask you to finish your thought when the timer goes off. Board members may question speakers but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items shall be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Is there anyone that would like to address the board?
Holly Blade. Okay. So I think it's important there's been a little bit of, I think, of a misunderstanding. A lot of the times that we have made comments about the minutes, the public comment was only one portion of that. I've been on boards before in meetings like this with meeting minutes, and usually there is at least some level of summary included in that. So again, we've been asking for that slight overview of a summary of the things that were taking place or the discussions that were being had. It was not solely just public comment, and it was absolutely never verbatim. It was never verbatim. And actually, if you look at the longest, the meeting minutes with the most pages, you will notice that 6 of the pages were actually from the superintendent giving his point-by-point response to most of the things that were asked, which I actually appreciate the fact that at least there was communication and he spent the time to do that. So the several pages was not actually because of a verbatim account of all the public comments that were made, nor was that ever expected or asked of. So it's not just, and it's also not just supposed to be applying to the public comment, but there should be some level of highlights or summaries of discussions, proposals, activities, things that are taking place, especially if it's something like a communication committee update that some resident is spending their time going to the committee and then spending their time coming here to give us an update. It would be nice if there was at least 1 to 2 sentences of that. I don't think that's that much to ask. If it is now going to go to another committee for this to change, I would just ask that you guys at least give us a timeline. Are we talking a month, or are we talking another year? Because it's been a year that we've been waiting for a town hall meeting. So, I mean, I can see somebody's upset with me on the stage, that's fine. I could tell that there were board members upset with other board members because they voted no. You're right, we talked about that at the Big Red Board Chat. How do you deal with disagreement? Is it okay that somebody doesn't agree with you on something? Is it okay that they voted no without them getting, without anyone getting visibly upset or angry with them about it? I feel like that should be reasonable and understandable. So also, the enrollment number is 1,900.
30 seconds.
What is being done to identify and address the reason why there's been a steady decrease for the last 12 plus years in this district? It was 2,600 kids in 2010, and we're going to maybe have 1,900. It is not COVID. It is because it started way before then, and it is not something that you see in the districts around us. So it is not because of a housing market or any of that kind of stuff. There is an ongoing issue, several issues going on that is causing a drastic decrease in student enrollment numbers. That is the job of the board and the administration, to identify the issues and then address the issues to make sure that this district does not continue to go down, because then you're going to risk our kids' futures, you're risking our teachers' careers, you're risking our community, and you're risking our property values, and you need to fix it.
Thank you, Ms. Flade. Are there others?
I have a quick question for Ms. Flade. I have just a quick question. I was just curious if you, sincerely, if you felt that the Big Red board chat was beneficial.
I did, and I felt great about our conversation after, and I'm still processing everything you've said tonight, but I'm struggling because my recollection is that you have not been sticking to what our conversation was as a unit. So that makes me concerned. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe I need to go back and think through it, but I'll be honest with you, I walked away from that hopeful, and I'm sitting here now thinking that this is not at all what we discussed.
No, I appreciate that. And I agree that there is a need to consider all the viewpoints. I apologize for my frustration tonight. I apologize to my fellow board member for my frustration. It is difficult to be up here, and it is difficult to convey our points of view and even at times our frustration. But no, I recall our conversation very well, and I hope that you'll find that I'm still going to be accessible, I'm still going to be approachable, and I will certainly consider again what we discussed. So, but if you felt that the Big Red board chat was beneficial, then I think that we should continue to do that.
We've been asking for that. I think it was beneficial. I think there was a lot of great value that came with that. We've been asking, and we just love, there's a lot of people in the community that would appreciate more opportunities like that.
Thank you.
All right, Kirk DeMars, finish up some of my thoughts on the communications committee and where we're going, and obviously some of your discussion that took place since that time. Yes, one of my things come back to me, the fact that, and I don't mean this in disrespect, but you guys are elected officials, and it's your job to represent your community, the parents, the children of this community. And ultimately, and I could be wrong about this, every one of these policies at some point came about through outspoken or people in communities voicing their desires for how their boards would function. I could be wrong on that, but again, you guys are members of the community, representatives of the community, and it seems to me that those policies should reflect how the community wants things to run. Hence, the reason for forming a communications committee to communicate with you guys as a liaison between us and you. So a lot of this banter back and forth about whether to change a policy and just, it's red tape. It's a lot of red tape to change something that your community wants. Whether you personally want 2 sentences, 2 pages, or the superintendent having 6 pages of comments, whatever we want to say, whatever your personal views are should take a back seat to what your community is coming to you and voicing what they want. And again, that's where I come back to some of my original comments, my first night here with you guys. And of course, you probably wouldn't remember it because you listen to a lot of people. But your position, you're elected to take a position and represent the people of your community, not sit in your chair and press your own agendas. So that's why I come back to the point that all this discussion about meeting minutes, it should come down to what the people of your community want. And if they want, again, these meeting minutes should be something that I can pick up and read in 5 minutes. Read in 5 minutes, and if I miss the meeting, quickly know, okay, this is what the board discussed, this is what the community discussed. We're part of the community. Our input here should be reflected in your minutes. If you allow us to have public comment, it should be reflected in your minutes, because it should have some level of influence in your decisions. That's the reason for the public comment.
30 seconds.
So I guess that's what I come back to, is that ultimately those meeting minutes, like one board member referenced, it is your official, word on what took place that night. Not YouTube, not Facebook, the modern technology we have, because we've seen that the modern technology fails. Sometimes a mic doesn't get turned on. Sometimes it doesn't upload properly, whatever the case may be. But those minutes are a way for somebody to go back to and say, oh, this community member on November 10th raised this concern. So in April of the next year, they can say, hey, look, April 10th, I brought this up as a concern. It hasn't been addressed. And there's a way to track those things and hold you guys accountable. Unfortunately, that's part of your job, is you're held accountable. It's just the way it is. But that's why I think it's important for people's content of what they say to be in your minutes, not simply Kirk DeMars spoke. That doesn't say what I said to you guys. So if you would please record my comments in a minute tonight. All of them from first speaking also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeMars. Are there others?
Hello, I'm Steve Freight. I sat up in the audience for several years listening to board meetings, and I told myself, my wife's on the board, I will not come down here. But I'm actually pretty saddened today. I've been saddened other times, but I get the feeling the board says, we're open to listening to people, but your actions actually don't show that. And I find that hard to take in, because you're supposed to listen to people, but you don't want them in minutes. You don't want to include anything they say, but you want to listen to them. You want someone to go to a YouTube video where the audio isn't very good. I've done it. I've gone to YouTube and Facebook. It's not great. It's not a good way to go back and see what somebody said. And you're like, well, we don't care what you said. That's what's being projected out to the audience. That's what's projected out to me. And then you have a communications group. Let's see what they want. Let's see what the community wants. You hear back, and then you're like, yeah, but we really don't want to listen to them anyways. That's what's projected out to the audience. And that's why I'm sad today. And then I find it almost ironic or funny that you get caught up on wording in a board bylaw that you can send to Thrun, your law company, and say, what do you think? I bet you they'll come back and say, you can include meeting minutes, or I'm sorry, the words of people, and it doesn't violate that bylaw. But all of a sudden you guys are following your bylaws, you guys are following things. Over several years, I watched the Open Meetings Act be violated by no closed meeting sessions minutes. It's clearly written in the law. I read bylaws, I saw them not followed. There's bylaws that are tied to conflict of interest. They weren't followed. You guys get up the next meeting and say, well, we followed them. We didn't violate anything. You did, and you guys ignore it. And then you sit there and say, we're listening to people. I don't get it because I don't see it. That's all. Please record my comments. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Freight. Are there others? Next on the agenda is superintendent comments. Mr. Gearbaugh.
On Tuesday, May 17th, our 6th through 12th grade band students performed an amazing concert here in the theater. The whole band and the small group performances were truly outstanding. Congratulations to our instrumentalists and Alicia Upton, our band director. We thank you for that enjoyable evening. The Milan High School National Honor Society induction ceremony was held on Thursday, May 19th. The ceremony was very nice, and we congratulate all of the student inductees and their parents. The junior and senior prom was held on Saturday, May 14th at the Dundee Mill. The evening was a huge success, full of energy and excitement. Thank you to Mr. Walleen and the students who helped organize, plan, and run the event. And thank you as well to Mrs. Walleen and the other staff members who helped chaperone the event on Saturday. The South and West Washtenaw Consortium Career Tech Ed Awards presentation was held on Thursday, May 19th. 2 Milan students were recognized and received awards. Dylan Spencer was named an outstanding student in Auto 1, and Holly Brown was recognized as a scholarship student in Auto 1. Congratulations to those students and all of our consortium students. Milan area schools will be recognizing our retirees at our June 7th board meeting. They'll be receiving invitations to that evening, and we look forward to being able to recognize their years of service to Milan area schools. The Washtenaw Association of School Boards held a legislative Zoom session on Monday, May 23rd. Topics discussed included federal school funding, state school funding, the state revenue conference held on Friday, May 20th, and concerns about educator shortages. As was already discussed, the school board vacancy is posted, and those applications are due by 4 p.m. tomorrow, May 25th. A notary is available in the office until 4 p.m. for those that need to have their documents notarized. Milan COVID data, as always, can be viewed on milanareaschools.org by clicking on the COVID case data link. We will continue to update that dashboard through the end of this school year. The District Sexual Health Advisory Committee, SHAC, met on Friday, May 20th. The committee was provided with copies of the MyFi student survey data and the community survey data regarding our health curriculum. Discussions were held on how to review the data and to prepare for the next meeting. At the next meeting, SHAC will discuss discrepancies between 3 data points: the age that students acknowledge becoming involved in specific activities, the age that the community wants specific topics taught, and the age that we currently teach those specific topics. If SHAC feels that changes need to be made, they will begin the process of investigating the possibility of those changes for presentation to the Board of Education. There's a very specific state-required process for any changes made to that curriculum that requires open hearings for the community and board action. On that day, SHAC welcomed new members. Based on the current committee makeup, the committee needed to add 1 student and 5 parents. We had 71 parents complete the survey requesting a seat on the committee. We had 5 clergy, 21 healthcare staff, and 5 student respondents with interest in serving on SHAC. Please don't add those numbers up because there were 72 people that filled out the survey. 71 of them were parents, but some of them are also clergy and healthcare employees or healthcare workers. Debbie Allen from the Communications Committee, Ryan McMahon, and myself conducted a completely random process to select and determine the new members. We actually numbered the members and had that number of ping pong balls in a box, and we drew ping pong balls out, and that determined who would be on the committee. Again, we added 5 parents and 1 student to the committee, and we appreciate them attending the first meeting, and they are preparing to attend their second meeting. We also made sure to draw more than the number of names that we needed so that we have an ongoing randomly selected list. In case any parents or anyone else steps down off the committee, we already have a randomly selected list of participants to invite. On Friday, May 13th, the Washtenaw County Superintendents and Police Chiefs from the county held a joint meeting. Topics that we discussed included community violence intervention and some things that the police departments are doing to address community violence that then brings itself into schools. We discussed the student threat assessment process that all of our social workers, administrators, and counselors will be trained on in the first week after school is out. And we talked about school safety and the continued use of Alice in the county. At the last board meeting, I was asked to provide an update on pupil counts. The pupil count, as you heard tonight, for our February count was 1,911.29 students. I had provided information to a community member who requested prior to that, and I informed that person that the numbers that I provided were not official. Several of the students in those numbers were not counted, and I also discovered that the adult ed students that I listed separately on that list were also included in the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade numbers. I did not know that they were included in Power School in that way, so my numbers were off by approximately 25 students because of that error, and the remainder of the difference are students who were not in complete attendance during the pupil count window, and therefore we could not get a full FTE for those students. So there was a discrepancy of 35 students. About 26 of that difference was because the adult ed students who only count for a partial FTE were in the head counts for grades 9 through 12, and the rest were students who were absent and could not be fully counted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Mr. McMahon.
Yep, I just have one announcement, and it is to inform you that Jen Saylor, high school Spanish teacher, has been offered and accepted the position of English language learner interventionist. That's a new position that we're using 11T funds to create. That'll carry it for 2 years, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Mrs. Saylor is one of 4 EL certified teachers in the district that's been a part of our committee. We've been growing that program over the last few years, and we're really excited to be at this point where we can have sort of a caseworker for the EL students, K-12, and she'll be in all 4 buildings next year, providing service for the students, providing professional development for the teachers, and programming for our families. So we're excited to have her on board.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. No student board member comments tonight. Board member comments.
Shall I?
Sure, Ms. Frape.
Congratulations to Jen Saylor. That's pretty cool. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing the news. I'd also like to thank the board and the students that come out, because it's really nice to be able to acknowledge our teams and our sports tonight. I also want to thank Mr. Sislo and our board members for their participation in our community events. I've had the pleasure before, but it was nice to hear Andrew sing the national anthem at the track meet. I got to see him at the soccer meet as well. It's also been a pleasure that we've been hosting, Milan has been hosting the regionals and league meets for track, so it's nice to be able to be out there and support our kids and have them come in and get the recognition they deserve for wearing the big M and being out there and supporting us. Also extremely excited, again, Jan, I thank you very much for the opportunity to attend the senior night tomorrow night and hand out awards on behalf of the board. I thank you for that opportunity, as well as the adult ed graduation that we'll be holding on Thursday night. Always a great time. Connie does a great job celebrating those graduates. And I am very thankful for the communication committee participants that came out and have spent their time working with us and giving us their recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Sisel.
Thank you, Ms. Freight. Mr. Farrell.
I just wanted to comment on one of the speakers that spoke earlier. First, the Communications Committee recommendation for additional specifics in the minutes was accepted by our secretary. The request that on a policy change that does need to go to the policy committee and then to the Board of Education. It was mentioned earlier that the board has made mistakes or has misapplied bylaws and policies. That's exactly what we're trying to correct. we can't pick and choose what we're going to follow and not follow. I believe that we have acknowledged mistakes that we've made in terms of bylaws and policy misinterpretations. But there's been a concerted effort, at least in my opinion, there's been a concerted effort to ensure that we are following our bylaws, rules, and policies. So despite the fact that we disagree, there is a current policy that states that you have to request that your comments in the minutes be included in the minutes. It's just not something that the communication committee can say, this is what we want, and so just do it. We actually have to go through a formal process. The other thing I just wanted to mention with regard to ESSER funds, the U.S. Department of Education recently issued a statement regarding an extension on ESSER fund spending for states and local school districts. Due to supply chain issues and labor shortages, many districts have experienced challenges when trying to spend these dollars to address the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. If these projects are signed by September 30th, 2024, these projects will not need to be liquidated, and the funds can be completely spent by April 2026. Michigan Department of Education will need to apply for the waiver, and it is in the process of putting together a memo with more details regarding the extension. I don't know if we're going to need the extension, but I wanted to bring it to the attention of the community. With regard to school functions, I did want to congratulate the 30 new inductees into the Milan High School National Honor Society induction. It was a really nice ceremony, and again, congratulations to those inductees. I also attended the recent band concert on May 17th. Bravo to Alicia Upton and her students on their outstanding performances. I do plan to attend the honors night tomorrow here at the high school at 6:30. Unfortunately, I will not be at the June 5th graduation ceremony as I have a work conflict that day. I also wanted to thank Yvette Casimir, our theater manager, for all the time, energy that she's investing with the many events taking place here in the high school theater. I just wanted you to know that you're very much appreciated. And then my last comment is I'm hoping that we will get the school calendar for the 22-23 school year by the next board meeting. Thank you.
So I completed the Justice Leaders class today. It's a four-part, well, the one I signed up for was a four-part class that started in March before I decided to resign from the board, and today was the final class. Just want to, I think I said this one other time during board member comments, but I highly recommend the class. If any of the board members can carve out the time to take it. I know Mrs. Kiger took it before me, but it's an excellent, excellent class. And I think it's important for us to understand what our staff have been trained on so that we can support them better as well. I was curious when I got done to see how many continuing education hours I have done on the board. And the answer is in 7 years, I've done 626 hours. Now, I'm sharing this information not because I'm special, because I'm not. Everybody up here spends an enormous amount of time doing things like continuing education. I was curious how that compares with other professional licenses and paid professions. So medical doctors, it's 50 hours every 2 years. Dentists are 40 hours every 2 years. Lawyers, unsurprisingly, are kind of complicated, but I think in the state of Michigan, it's 24 per year, and my average was 89 per year. So I just want to take a second to recognize the amount of effort that everybody sitting on this, and that doesn't include things like meeting prep and committee work and all of that kind of stuff. All of that isn't included in our continuing ed. So I just want to take a second to acknowledge the amount of work that all of you put in to the work that we do sitting here for 2 or 3 hours every 2 weeks. There's a lot that happens behind the scene that I'm not sure the community is always aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ladingham. Ms. Heiko.
I also attended the band concert and am always amazed, especially with the younger kids. I think Ms. Upton made a point to say that I think it's the 8th graders had never had a full year of band because of COVID. And yet they were able to play, I think it was one song, maybe it was two, with the high school band. And they sound phenomenal. So I'm always amazed at what Miss Upton can do with those kids in a very short period of time. So kudos to her and kudos to all those kids, because I think it takes a lot to be able to sit up here and play your instrument in front of what was a very packed auditorium. I also attended the National Honor Society inductee ceremony. Congratulations to all of those kids. And to all of the kids who were already in the National Honor Society. They put on a very nice program. They all worked really hard, you know, to just be very open and accommodating to everyone who was being inducted. And I think too that it was an interesting, I always say this about our community, there were at least 2 or 3 families there who had several generations of Milan High School National Honor Society members. And that's not uncommon in our community. And I think it's part of what makes our community so strong. So congratulations to all of those kids and to all of those families. I want to encourage everyone, if you're going to be doing some planting this weekend, I know I am, go to the FFA greenhouse. I already bought a bunch of flowers there. As always, they're beautiful. There's lots of things there. So before you go to all the other places, go there and check out what they have first. I also attended all weekend long, so thank you to Yvette Cashmere and all of those kids who are up there, who are her assistants and help out. They were here all weekend long, and I think Yvette was here all week to get ready for a community event that was here. The Dance Explosion dance studio in town had their recital. There was a show Friday night, 2 on Saturday, and then 1 on Sunday. Our theater director and all of her assistants, they did an amazing job. The lighting was beautiful, the sound was amazing, the recital ran on time, which for a mom like me who was here all day Saturday was very important. And so just kudos to all of them on how they keep all of that rolling, and the kids were very helpful of all the adults that were, you know, trying to get all their dancers everywhere. And our theater kids worked the concession stand all weekend also. So they were all here also this weekend trying to raise money through concessions and sales. And they were also very helpful of all the community people who are coming through. Because there are a lot of Milan kids that dance at that studio, but there are also a lot of kids from Saline and other neighboring communities who got an opportunity to come in and just see this great facility and how well everything runs and just what a great place this is to be. In continuance of our recognizing of student achievement, I would like to recommend that at the next board meeting that we recognize all of the kids who were in the plays this year, because I think that sometimes we say we all go to the plays and they're all great, but I don't think we've ever brought them in to acknowledge their accomplishments in the play, so I'd like to see them come in. I also like to see, because I cannot go to senior night, if we could invite some of those scholarship winners to come so we can acknowledge them as a board and publicly, because I don't know that necessarily the community will come to honors night. It's really just parents and families and things that come to that. But I'd like to acknowledge them publicly at a board meeting, and I know our time is very short with some of these kids, especially the seniors. I'd like to get them in before they all leave, if possible. And I think the play kids too, because I'd like to get us on a cadence where we try to recognize the students before they leave. And our time is short. Also, after looking at the budget amendment, I'm going to renew my request, Mr. Gearball, that you reached out to your DE&I committee and see what money or funds or support they may need to provide PD for our staff, because while I understand with COVID, you know, PD isn't always available, but I know we have a committee who's working really hard on how to make sure that our staff has the training that they need, and I suspect that some of that money that we just put back into the general fund or back into the fund balance may have been able to be used for some PD, and I think that they have some suggestions on how to do that. So I'm going to start bugging you about that again.
I actually met with the DEI committee earlier this week. We spent about an hour and 45 minutes in a Zoom, and I have some next steps, and they have some next steps, and then we have a meeting set for early in the summer so that they can start doing some summer work to be prepared for next year.
Perfect, thank you. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Ika. Ms. Kiger?
I just, with the school year wrapping up and coming to an end fairly quickly, I just want to take another opportunity to thank all of our staff, because you've done a phenomenal job this year of educating our students and taking care of them, and you don't hear it enough, but you're just wonderful, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kiger. I have no comments. Meeting's adjourned at 10:03.